Well, hello and welcome to the Plain Talking UK podcast, and it's the New Year 2022 show. Always exciting stuff, lots of things to talk about, and a bit of a review of some of our favourite moments from this year. So joining me over in the PTUK Master Suite studio is Matt. Happy New Year, Matt.
And to you, Nev, and to you. Now, what did you do over Christmas? You were off to Belfast, I think, weren't you?
Yes, had a great time in Belfast. Great city. I've only ever been there on work duties previously, but it was nice to go there. Weather was typical Belfast weather, a bit wet and windy, but went up to the Giant's Causeway for a walk around there, which was beautiful, and also to the Titanic Museum, where a couple of my chums were involved with the audiovisual production and equipment installation there. So that was really great. So,
I need a full review of it because I've actually been, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on the museum itself.
Yeah, great. It's a fantastic place, and you can go around it in about 2 hours, and it doesn't feel like 2 hours at all. It's really, really nice, and fun for all the family, and of course, most importantly, a nice cafe at the end of it as well.
Well, that's true. I must admit, as I say, that's one of the things that blew my mind away from going there. Of course, was the amount, the volume of artifacts that they had there from the actual Titanic. That was one of the things that really blew me away.
I think this is it. I mean, we all know, we kind of think we know the story, don't we? But it's not to actually go around the whole thing, and with the amount of detail that they are showing there, it is remarkable, absolutely incredible. And so I was very impressed. I'm normally sort of fairly critical about these kinds of things, but honestly, if you fancy a trip out to the Titanic Museum, I can thoroughly recommend it in just outside Belfast, down by the docks there.
And of course, the building itself is sort of like a work of art in its own right, isn't it? With the layout and that kind of thing. It's a beautiful building.
Yeah, and a bit like it's called the Titanic Quarter, that new developed area down by the dockside there, and it really is great, and they've presented it beautifully. Lots of different things to do, and when the weather's nice, it's a nice walk around outside as well. So a really good day out. Thoroughly enjoyed ourselves.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Well, so I had quite a quiet Christmas in comparison. I think it was just me and my mum on Christmas Day, and then we went down to Boxing Day to go and see my uncle who lives in Clacton, and had the usual Boxing Day family shenanigans down there. And essentially, I think I don't know about you, Nick, but most people around here seem to be going out of their way to try and avoid COVID at the moment. It's all a bit rife.
Yes. Yeah, I know. There's a lot of it about. Sadly, my son's picked it up, so he's having to self-isolate at his mum's house, so he can't even see his son, his 1-year-old son at Christmas time. He saw him Christmas Day, but that was it. So, hopefully he's better now. But yes, Mrs. Nev and I have been using the lateral flow tests and all the rest of it, especially when we mix it with the Great Unwashed,
of course,
in economy class on British Airways.
Wait, hang on, abort. You weren't in 1A for your trip over to Belfast?
Well, I was, but obviously those passengers had to go past me.
Oh, I see, right.
Into steerage class.
Oh, right, I see.
Call it.
I sort of assumed thered be some kind of filtering screen or something protecting you.
I agree that there ought to be, really.
Fair enough.
But no, it's always a good idea, especially if you're mixing it with people that you are not normally with. But so far, all good, and so that's
absolutely great. Yeah, no, all good. So it sounds like a good Christmas and New Year had by all. You probably noticed that we are a couple of people missing on this particular episode, and there's a very good reason for that, Nev, isn't there?
Yes, where are they? I mean, for goodness' sake, we told them where we're going to be.
Absolutely.
But no, the dynamic duo are in the United States of America.
Indeed.
And having a very good time indeed. I'm thoroughly envious of all the stuff that's been going on there, I must say.
Now, we've had a bit of a sneaky peek of what's been going on here. So I think probably the best thing we can do here, Nev, is shall we play them the little video that they sent of us, which is essentially their year in review?
Let's do that.
Well, hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great holiday season. I've got Carlos.
Hey!
I've got an airplane. Carlos just flew this airplane. Carlos, what have we done today?
What have we done? We have Well, we've checked the aircraft over first, which is always an important thing. Pre-flight checks.
Starting from the beginning, yes.
Yep, starting from the beginning, yep. Taking off all the covers on the pitot tubes and on the inlet.
Oh, well, the abridged version, we completed the pre-flight.
The pre-flight.
Yeah, Carlos helped me with that. We are sitting in a Pilatus PC-12. The mission today was to take the owner of this aircraft up to Asheville, North Carolina. So we did the pre-flight. Carlos did all fantastic first officer duties. So he stocked the bar, the snacks, ice, pre-flight, clean the airplane, the whole thing, everything we do ready for passengers. And then we headed out to Asheville. 9,000 feet or so. Oh no, we were at 12,000 feet.
12,000, yeah.
Yep, it's a pretty short flight. It's only 30 minutes. What did you think of Asheville?
Asheville is, I think, how America was or looked 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Yeah. Authentic American.
Yeah, that's
Asheville. True. Yeah.
We went to a nice little steakhouse.
Yeah.
Didn't get a chance to eat because the owner called and said he was actually ready to come back. So what was supposed to be a 3 to 4 hour sit on the ground turned into about an hour.
Yeah.
But we checked out a local airport there that we're thinking about bringing the Pilatus into. A nice short strip, 3,000 foot by 40 feet, which is nice and challenging. No taxiways, just grass. But I think we came to the conclusion.
You can get in and get out.
Yeah, we could do it safely, not too heavy. It's kind of what the Pilatus is built to do. So I think the owner may have us go up there in the near future. Let's see, what else? Came back very quickly to the airplane. Got ready. Carlos got to experience the Signature FBO chain. What do you think about Signature, actually, and the life of a corporate pilot just hanging out?
It's a lovely building, FBO building with multiple rooms, rooms for a bit of R&R, somewhere to eat, somewhere to sleep, somewhere to do your pre-flight planning, all spotlessly clean. Really nice, actually.
Yeah,
I thought it was really nice. FBO, yeah.
Yeah, they do a really good job. Most Signatures are really just world-class facilities. So we got to see that. The people just kind of hanging out, pilots in some comfy lounge chairs with a camera pointed at the front door, just in case their passengers walk in and you gotta scurry on down to the airplane to get it ready. What else? I saw some cool airplanes up there. There's some net jets. There was cool Air Force planes.
Yep. We saw a V-22.
V-22
before we took off, yeah.
And then Carlos actually hand flew most of the way back. A little bit different than a 150, huh?
Yeah, when you're used to flying a 150 and used to inputting control movements like this, on this aircraft, a Pilatus, the control movements are like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we were doing 266 knots over the ground. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. It doesn't take very much to move the airplane, right?
Yeah.
And we were doing a little bit of automation there, but we never turned the autopilot on, which we have the ability to do in this airplane, is just hand fly it. And Carlos did a pretty good job, I think. It started, let's just to say the oscillations reduced as the flight went along. But I thought you did a pretty good job. And we were in mountainous. It was bumpy coming into Charlotte class Bravo, so it was not an easy flight in that it was so fast, right? A lot of things happening, but I thought you did pretty good.
Yeah, I kind of covered the other aspects of a first officer's job, I suppose.
Yeah,
Checklist,
gear, radios, flaps. Well, I guess we didn't. The radios.
I didn't speak on the radio, so that would have really thrown the ATC to hear my voice on the radio. But
otherwise pretty good. And this is kind of the culmination of his trip here to the U.S. I think we'll probably talk about it at some point, but he's basically been indoctrinated into American life. Skydiving, barbecue, lots of beer, flying. Oh, geez. Ice skating.
Yeah.
So, pretty good. So, it's been nice having Carlos here for pretty much a week. Oh, and that doesn't even count Atlanta.
Yeah.
That was just all Charlotte. But thank you guys. Thanks everybody for a wonderful year on the show. I think, man, we've talked about it and we just couldn't be any happier with where we are at the end of 2021. Thanks to the fans and everybody that downloads the show and watches the show. All our guests have been on
amazing.
Point this year.
Yeah.
Nev with some of the content that he's produced, just amazing. Of course, that's due to contributions that allow us to get some pretty nice kit. But Matt, man, he's just like a pro now, right? the system works itself, and
he may not realise that Matt has learned aircraft stuff.
Yeah.
That's
probably the biggest takeaway from 2021 is Matt knows airplane things, which I think is pretty cool. And of course, John, who's just worked so hard. I don't know that many of our actual listeners know what John does for a living, but it doesn't allow him a lot of free time, and he does an amazing job with the time that he is given to edit these shows and get all our behind the scenes stuff done. So just great 2021, and
look,
400th is coming up.
Yeah, 400th next year in February on the 26th.
And then on to 500.
Yeah, on the 500. And hopefully I'll be welcoming Armando and his family into the UK for the 400th in February.
Me too. I hope the travel stays open.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of you guys do too. So
yeah.
Anyway, I guess from Charlotte, North Carolina,
in the cabin here.
Yeah, inside of the airplane. We're signing off for now, right?
Okay. Take care, everyone. See you in 2022.
Bye.
Bye.
I mean, wow.
Yeah.
I still can't believe Armando let him fly the plane. What's the matter with the guy?
The man has taken leave of his senses.
Indeed, clearly.
I need to have a word with him when he comes over.
Yeah. Yes, sternly worded letter at least, if nothing else. But
fancy letting Carlos in the first officer's seat position. I mean, I only hope he wasn't involved with any of the radio calls, because that part of the world, they would have not been able to understand a word Carlos was saying. I would imagine.
You can imagine with a heavy Norfolk accent trying to communicate with ATC. That's not going to end well, is it?
No, especially in Charlotte and all that neck of the woods. So,
indeed.
But no, it's great to see them having such a great time. As I say, I'm thoroughly envious.
Absolutely.
And, begin to wonder why we weren't invited, but that's a conversation for another day.
It is indeed. Okay, so we're here to review the year, as both Carlos, Nev and Armando have said. So I reckon we should start with you, Nev. What segment most grabbed your attention in 2021?
There's so many to choose from, and I was racking my brains to think of a favourite one. If I was allowed to have, 3 or 4, I would probably do that, but then we'd be into a 4-hour show probably, which we can't really do.
No.
But one of my, I would say this is my personal favourite for the last year, was the interview that we did with Rory Auskerry. And Rory's a fascinating fella, very, very entertaining as well. You'll know him from his Rory on Air podcast and his YouTube channel, and also many other things he's done besides. So we were lucky to grab hold of him for about 45 to 50 minutes on the show, and this is how it went. Rory is a commercial helicopter and fixed-wing microlight pilot. He's also an award-winning radio presenter, multimedia producer and voiceover artist. In 2019, after more than a decade at the BBC working as a studio director, he quit his job and took a leap of faith towards his dream of becoming a professional helicopter pilot. Well, after 14 months of intensive integrated training, which is a process he's very kindly shared with the public each step of the way on his YouTube channel, and he's now fully qualified to do that, and he joins us now on the show. Well, hello again, Rory. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to getting into some helicopters and aeroplanes chat with you guys.
Well, yes, there's already been some abuse in the chat room from our resident A320 captain Al, and who says that Rory has exchanged a lawnmower engined washing line for something even more dangerous, a helicopter.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat now. It's not my PR. I'm not lucky enough to have one, but I did see that comment.
Yeah, it's
So
all right.
it just gives you an idea of the tone of how things might go.
Mind you, I'm a little bit in Al's camp here and this is one thing that I'm hoping to have a myth or 12 debunked from, because I'm convinced that helicopters essentially defy science and logic and were basically made at Hogwarts. I can't get my head around them. I really can't.
Actually, Matt, just read out Micah's one, because that is brilliant what Micah's just put in the
Oh,
chat.
is this the question? Or
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
right.
it's
Yes,
really
it
good.
says basically a question for Rory. A helicopter pilot friend of mine once told me that learning to fly a helicopter is very similar to learning to balance on a beach ball. Wow. Okay. Any truth in that?
Do you know what? Actually, there really is. To begin with, when I first started it, I honestly thought there must be something wrong with this aircraft, because it's just not doing what I expected it to do at all. And after a while, you start to realise that no, it's not the aircraft that's at fault. It's you. And eventually, after much considerable consternation and time spent and patience of an instructor sat there poised, ready to sort of snatch it back from you when it inevitably goes awry in the hover, you do sort of get it. But yeah, the beach ball analogy, I think the first time I had a go in an R22, I remember thinking it was like a round bottomed glass bowl in water that had no keel, so it would just sort of loll around willy-nilly under the whim of the breeze. But it's not so bad now. I've got used to it.
Wow.
Absolute classic. Yes, that's a very good description, I think, that, isn't it? But well, let's go right the way back to when you were a little boy, Roy. So where did your love of aviation come from in the first place?
Well, I was fortunate to grow up on a remote island in Scotland, in the Orkney Islands, on the east side of Orkney. It's called Owskerry, so I'm named after the island. It was just my family that lived on it, so my parents and two younger brothers, and we had a flock. We still do. My parents still farm a flock of rare breed North Ronaldsay sheep, and it was a wonderful upbringing. Lots of outdoors, lots of fresh air, lots of exercise, lots of stuff washed up on the beach to play with, and things to get involved in on the farm. But it was also pretty quiet. There was just our family, so there wasn't a lot of interaction with other people for large chunks of the year. And aside from, maybe the odd aeroplane that would occasionally fly over or the odd fishing boat that would go past, there wasn't a lot of particularly exciting activity until once or twice a year, the Northern Lighthouse Board would turn up to do maintenance work on the lighthouse that's on the end of the island. And to do that maintenance, they would normally arrive with a ship, which they would moor about a mile off the coast, and they would put their guys and their equipment ashore via shuttle runs done with a Bolko 105 helicopter. And I just, from the age of about 6 onwards, I remember being utterly captivated by that beautiful, bright red, noisy jet fuel smelling machine where the pilots would get out wearing flight suits and their bars and all the rest of it. And I just thought, this is the coolest thing ever, and I'm going to do that. And I remember distinctly thinking, that is what I want to do for a job. And it never went. It never went. Every time they came, I was obsessed with it. I'd watch every single move they made. I just, like some of you have mentioned earlier, in a jokey way, I thought it was a magic carpet. I still do, to be honest, even though I understand how it works. There is an element of magic to it. When you look at them sort of shut down with their rotors kind of drooping, and, they do look a bit ungainly, and you think, oh, how's that ever going to get in the air? But it's just fantastic. And it still captures my excitement just as much now at the age of 32 whenever I see or hear a helicopter as it did when I was a little boy.
Yeah, so growing up there, then, I mean, presumably aviation was quite necessary to get to and from the mainland.
Well, yes, it was. I mean, we never had the option of going by aircraft from Owskerry. It was always small boats, but once you got onto the Orkney mainland, you could fly down to Inverness or Aberdeen or whatever. We also had an Islander aircraft, little twin-engined turboprop that would do trips to the North Isles, that were around us. So we saw that little aeroplane occasionally. I actually once won a competition at school for drawing an utterly terrible picture of it, but they seemed to like it because they said it sort of captured the excitement of it, even though I could see other people's pictures were much more true likeness to it. Mine looked like a banana with wings. But there was a bit of that. And then, of course, there was, Shetland Coast Guard would sometimes appear with I think it was a Sikorsky S61 they used to use that did the sort of search and rescue job. So there was a bit of that. And then, of course, there was the North Sea oil crew changer. So there was a fair bit of aviation activity, but the Bolko 105 turning up. And, I remember the first time they took me up for a little flight around the island in it. And it's a tiny island, so it literally took about a minute and a half to go right around the edge. But it was one of the best minute and a half of my life, certainly.
Wow.
Well, trying to recover his pithy comment earlier, Captain Al says, all jokes aside, Rory will make an excellent instructor. He really has the right balance of knowledge and integrity.
My goodness. That's
wow.
Well, that's very kind of him. I'll send him more money next time.
No, I wouldn't. He'll only spend it on wine. Sorry, the radio geek in me has to ask this question, I'm afraid, Rory. I mean, how did you go from obviously this passion of wanting to be flying helicopters, obviously where you were living, etc. I mean, how did you go from that to what certainly us here in the UK know you as, working on 5 Live and sort of running studios and all sorts?
Well, it actually was a real stroke of luck because one of the other things that was integral to our life on the island was the radio. We didn't have a TV till I was 14, and even then it was one of those tiny little black and white ones with an actual knob you had to tune in and a little hoop aerial like you'd see in a cartoon. It was hopeless.
No remote control then?
No remote control, and it was just awful. But we relied hugely on the radio because it didn't require much electricity, and it was available the whole time. So I loved the radio, and I still do. And once I sort of finished being homeschooled at about the age of 14 and started going into the local grammar school in Kirkwall on the Orkney mainland, and I'd commute back and forth at the weekends on a fishing boat. I started to, just kind of become more and more interested in radio. And one Children in Need night, I walked into the local radio station, BBC Radio Orkney, and sort of said, sounds really interesting. Is there any chance I could kind of hang around and maybe do something to help? And amazingly, the boss at the time, instead of sending this spotty 16-year-old away with a flea in his ear, he actually invited me in and said, yeah, come and get involved. And I honestly never left. I went straight back in the following Monday and said how great it had been. Can I come back and do more work experience? And I just basically weaseled my way in to the BBC. And then around the same time, I'd phoned all 3 of the armed forces. I phoned the Navy, the RAF and the Army and said, I'd like to become a helicopter pilot. Will you take me? And within the space of 15 minutes, my career dream was dashed because all of them on the recruitment line said no on the basis of I was too tall because I'm 6'4", and I had a medical history of asthma on my record as a small child, which I'd already grown out of by that point, but it was on my history and they weren't interested. And when she said, you're too tall, I said, well, why is that? And she said, well, this was the RAF lady. She said, well, you're too tall. If you have to eject from a jet, you'll lose your legs because they'll be underneath the control console. And I said, well, typical smart Alex 16-year-old. I said, well, I don't want to be a fast jet pilot. I want to fly helicopters. And as far as I know, you can't eject from them.
And how was that received?
Well, I suspect she thought, well, this guy's got an attitude. We definitely don't want him. So it was probably more that than the height thing. But anyway, that sort of dashed it. So at that point, I just ploughed all my effort into the radio, and I worked at the BBC every night after school and, kind of went down that road. Eventually got a job at 5 Live and, I moved to London and then up to Salford and did that for several years. And it was kind of the aviation thing just never went away. You'll all know the same thing, and everyone watching this will, I'm sure, feel the same, that once the aviation bug's bitten you and you've got it in your mind that you want to fly, it just won't stop.
Wow.
I was just going to ask you as well, because that must have been a massive moment for you. And I remember you showing us a video of you leaving BBC Media City at Salford for the last time. I mean, how long did it take you to make that decision to leave the BBC and to become a full-time helicopter pilot?
Well, it was a big decision, and it was a huge decision for my long-suffering wife, Lizzie, as well, who's been a tremendous support to me throughout all of this, and I couldn't have done what I've done without her. But I'd been lucky because once we'd moved to Manchester and we'd got settled, and I'd got this job at the Beeb, and I'd started earning a little bit of money, and we'd kind of got fairly well organised. And of course, Barton Airfield was a 10-minute drive from where I lived. And I saw the small aircraft there, and I just thought, well, maybe there's a way for me to at least get a license to just fly for fun. And I was already, by that point, I'd kind of put to bed the idea of ever being a commercial pilot. I thought, well, fate's just not going to work. It's not going to be a thing for me. I'll just try and do it for fun. And I went and spoke to one of the schools there, a couple of the schools, in fact, and eventually settled on Main Air Flying School and doing a microlight NPPL license. And I absolutely loved it from day one. From the first trial flight in a Eurostar, I thought, this is just as good as I thought it would be. It's not a helicopter, but it's brilliant in its own way. And I'm going to be able to go exploring and fly and call myself a pilot. So I piled into that. I flew twice a week. I was on shifts at the BBC, so it was easy for me to fly during weekdays and all the rest of it, which was great. And eventually, after about a year of training, I got that license. And that's when I started the Rory on Air channel. I thought, well, I'll film my flights so I can review them afterwards for my own sort of performance development. Because, I notice a lot of things when I'm editing a video that I maybe didn't notice in the air, or little nuances with stuff that happens on the radio or whatever. So it's been a useful tool. But again, the aviation thing, you always want to just do more. It's like, oh, okay, well, I can fly that, so maybe I could try another type of aeroplane. Maybe I'll get my LAPL license, because there's a loophole that means that if I get it now, I might one day get a PPL. Lizzie's like, you're not going to spend more money on it, are you? You've already got a license. Why do you need another? I'm like, well, blue folder's a blue folder. I wouldn't mind another one. I've got 3 now. So I sort of ploughed on with that, and then we'd been up in Orkney, Lizzie and I, for a summer holiday, and we were literally driving back in the car. Lizzie was driving. I was scrolling through Facebook in the passenger seat, and I saw this advert from Heli Centre for these Bristow cadets to join and get trained as a commercial helicopter pilot and sent off onto the North Sea. And I looked at the requirements for what was needed, and it was things like UK driving license, 5 GCSEs, a legal right to work in the UK. And I was like, tick, yeah, I've got that. And I showed it to Lizzie when we arrived back home, and she said, well, you might as well apply. She subsequently said to me she didn't think I'd actually get through, so she thought it might as well just encourage me to apply anyway. So I put in an application, and long story short, which you can watch the kind of full story on Rory on Air, but long story short, they offered me a place. I didn't win one of the Bristow sponsorship, so I ended up having to pay for the course myself, but there was only 8 of us on the course. 4 of them were the Bristow cadets, and then there's 4 of us who've self-funded it ourselves. So out of, I think they had about 850 applications in the first place, so to have got down to one of the last spaces, even with having to pay for it myself, felt like an achievement. And I talked to Lizzie and my parents about it a lot, and I just thought, look, I'm 31. If I don't do this now, this really is absolutely it. It's game over for commercial flying for me. I'm never going to get another chance. And sometimes you just have to take a risk in life. And I loved the BBC. I loved my job there. I had a great relationship with my colleagues. It was good fun. It was exciting. I could see myself doing that happily as a career. But again, that nagging feeling of I just wanted to be in the sky. And if someone's going to pay me to be in the sky and it's a helicopter, I just had to do it.
Wow.
On the air of role models, actually, Rory, because I think most of us watch various YouTube channels of pilots who have their own channels, like yourself, and you kind of look at a lot of the youngsters especially look at these pilots and follow these pilots and think, oh, I really want to be, I want to deal with his, I want to fly what he's flying. at the start of this kind of thing with you, when it all started, the kind of whole flying, wanting to fly, learn to fly, to where you are now, was there any particular kind of role models you had that you knew of, or you knew personally, or you saw online or on sort of social media?
Yeah, well, I mean, social media wasn't really a thing back then, but when I started Rory on Air, a couple of the big inspirations for me was John, the flying reporter, and Plain Old Ben, both of who already had successful YouTube channels. And I sort of looked at theirs and I thought, well, perhaps I could try and do something a bit like that, but my niche would be microlights when they were flying Group A stuff. So that was kind of one of my start points for that. And both of them have since become good friends, which is really nice. And I've met actually a lot of really good friends through the YouTube community. So it's, that's been really great. But winding it back a bit further than that, actually, aside from the Northern Lighthouse Board, and it was actually Bond Helicopters who they hired, and it was their pilots that were always willing to answer my questions and let me sit in the cockpit. Although I remember once when I was sick, one of them offered to let me sit in the cockpit, obviously when it was all shut down, and I refused because I thought it was so magical that there was a strong chance it might actually just take off with me in it and I wouldn't know what to do. So I refused and I just stood next to it and looked in, and I've always regretted that since. But no, they were great. But the Orkney Flying Club, there was a flying club in Orkney that had a Cessna 172, a bit of a battered old thing, but it flew. And some of the guys there had built their own aeroplanes as well. And it was, there was guys in their sort of 40s, 50s and 60s who'd go there for an hour or two on a Sunday morning. And I would pedal out to the airport on my push bike in all weathers and sit in this drafty old porter cabin with them. And I was the youngest person there by about 30 years. And they were so friendly and encouraging. And every time they went flying, if they had a spare seat, they would take me with them. They were just fantastic, and they always encouraged me. And I think that's hugely important to get people into this industry, because it is difficult. The exams are hard. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. There are a lot of barriers, finance, itself being one of them. And my parents are, crofting sheep farmers. They're not wealthy bankers or anything like that. So, financially, that's why I never thought it was going to happen. If the military weren't going to pay for it, there was no way I was ever going to be able to afford it. But, 10 years of hard work and all the rest of it. So it is difficult, but role models are really important. And I wouldn't like to call myself a role model to anybody, but if anyone watches my channel and sees what I'm doing and what I've done and wants to follow what else might happen next in my career, and if in some tiny way helps to give them just that little bit of a nudge to think, yeah, I'm going to give this a go myself, then, that's a win. If one person becomes a pilot of any shape or form because of something I've said or done, that's worth it.
Actually, all jokes aside, with Captain Al here, we were just saying, he was just saying both Rory and the Flying Reporter have been very honest in the mistakes that they've made. So this is a very important aspect of learning, and is very much to be encouraged. And I think really that, Al does sort of like type rating training and stuff of sort of A320s and things like that. So, this is a guy who knows what he's talking about. But I think that's so true, isn't it? I think that's one of the nice things about your channel, is it is very much warts and all, if you see what I mean. So it hasn't always gone smoothly for you, and you've been gracious enough, if you like, to share that with the people that are following you.
Well, that's very kind of you, and I think the Flying Reporter does a tremendous job of that. To be honest, it's actually quite difficult, because on the one hand, I love sharing the mistakes because they're often the things that are entertaining and people will learn from that. I learn from it, and I don't want to take away the opportunity for other people to benefit from seeing me make a mistake and learn from it by cutting it out. But on the other hand, I have to bear in mind that anyone who might think about employing me isn't going to want to employ somebody who looks like an idiot who can't operate an aircraft safely. So there has to be a line somewhere. Fortunately, I, hand on heart, don't think I've done anything really stupid yet. But, I have cut things out because, in the context of a video or the way it's edited, it may just not look good. And, taken out of context, and particularly on the internet, people who, armchair pilots can be quite harsh. And again, I'm very lucky that, the vast bulk of the comments I get on my channel are all positive and friendly and helpful. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And I sort of wonder as the channel grows and the net gets cast wider, whether or not that'll change. So that'll be interesting to see. But the editing process and whether to include mistakes and errors and all that sort of stuff is a constant battle for me, and is something that I discuss on a regular basis. I mean, every video that I've produced while I've been flying with HeliCenter, they've watched and checked for me before I've put it online, because
Right.
obviously it's their aircraft, it's their train set, as I say, and they have a right to have their business and their flight school represented fairly, but also I don't want my channel and my videos to scupper my employment prospects in the future with HeliCenter and wider afield too. So it is a difficult sort of call to make. And one of the things that's come up in the last few weeks is about me sort of appearing to present while I'm flying, because I'm talking kind of to an audience whilst I'm flying as well. And I think, I can see why people might be concerned about that, and it is a difficult one. But because I am a broadcaster at heart, that's what my old job was. A lot of people are scared of microphones and cameras, and they get distracted by them, and they think they need to look at them carefully. And it's a bit of a thing, whereas it's not a thing for me now, because I've been flying with cameras in the cockpit for 150 hours, probably nearly 200 hours now. And I'm so used to having them around. A radio show, when you're the presenter and you're the person driving the mixing desk, it's all one thing. You can't talk without driving the mixing desk, and you can't do the mixing desk without talking. So you have to do it all at once. And, obviously you're thinking about the flying 100% and probably not saying anything when you're on final approach and all that sort of stuff. But when you're in the cruise and you've done all the checks and everything's trimmed and you're keeping a good lookout, I feel like I have the capacity to say something that might end up on a video that's a bit more and over and above what somebody else who isn't from a broadcasting background would say. But again, taken out of context, people might think, oh, this guy's not concentrating on the flying, he's just presenting a TV program in a cockpit. That's dangerous. This guy's an idiot. So it's very difficult. And
yeah, sort of like on the flip side to that, though, as you say, because that used to be your job essentially, something like with the rest of us were doing would take us more time, if you like, to be able to do that. You're literally almost able to do that because of your background, if you like, almost in your sleep. So if you like, you're so used to doing it, there is more capacity for you to be. It's much more natural for you to be chatting away and talking to people, because that's what you were doing, like day in, day out, obviously at 5 Live.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is totally how I see it. And look, aviation in any form is dangerous and is something to be taken incredibly seriously. And, there's no room for mistakes and joking around to a large degree, particularly in helicopters. I mean, they are an unusual beast, and they have to be treated with great respect, because if something goes wrong, you've not got very long to deal with it effectively before you're in a real pickle. And I'm very well aware of that. And, that does sort of play on my mind a lot. But on the other hand, yes, for me personally, I wouldn't do anything that I wouldn't feel is totally safe. And I talk to myself when I'm in the cockpit anyway. If one of you came and flew with me, you would hear me saying the checks out loud, talking myself through what I'm going to do next, what I'm thinking about next, what's happening, next in the flight, because that's how I process it. That's how I kind of learn. That's how I operate. I'm a talky sort of person. And so if that comes out on a video looking like I'm presenting, it's not really, it's just me doing what I normally do.
Yeah, I just look into the chat room at the moment. Alex Robinson says he's personally learnt things from Rory's channel, even little things like how easy it is to fly the lane at East Midlands, which he used today.
Excellent. Well, that's great. That's another interesting point, is that I've spoken to quite a few pilots who seem quite, new pilots who seem nervous about controlled airspace and doing things like the Shep Shed Long Eaton Lane at East Midlands, or even the low-level corridor up near Manchester, things like that. And my experience of controllers I was nervous about it too. There's a video on my channel where I took my wife up to Fife from Barton, which was a long day out in the Icarus, And I remember the nerves when I knew I was going to have to key the mic to speak to Edinburgh Radar and ask them for a transit through the Zenith. Oh, well, I felt like a naughty schoolboy. But they couldn't have been more helpful. It couldn't really have been any easier. They asked me to hold. They asked me if I could see the landing A320. I said A firm, and off I went.
Actually, you mentioned as I say, doing the flight through Fife and stuff. I've got in front of me here one of the videos that I'm going to play here now. Now this was flying through London. Am I correct? This particular video?
Yeah. This is the heli lanes. This was great.
I mean, it's like. How on earth? What that must? I mean, is there a lot of commentary in your ears going on? Obviously, when you're flying through somewhere like London, I mean, because it's that's very controlled airspace.
Yes, it is, and we briefed a lot about this before we went, and I studied the chart, and I studied because there's a lot of different altitudes that you have to be at because you fly underneath the approach for the runways at Heathrow. This bit here where we're going past the western end is actually very rare to be able to do that in a helicopter without a lot of holding. I was told by James, he was impressed that we got to do that. So as awful as COVID has been and is, particularly for the airline industry, if there's one small bonus was that I got to do that. And there was a lot going on in my ears. There was a lot of radio stuff, but I don't think there was as much, anything like as there would have been normally. And the controllers were as, incredibly accommodating, which was fantastic. But that was a real trip. And every time I've done something like that, the trip through Edinburgh up to Fife, it was a long way. It was, with Lizzie. So it wasn't anyone who knew anything about aviation who could help me. I had to do it all myself. I had to put my big boy pants on and get on with it. And the heli lanes, obviously, I had James there to help me. But the idea was for me to try and do it without help so that I knew I could do it on my own. And they're just fantastic experiences, and that's one of the things that Heli Centre have done so well is really pushed us on the integrated course. We've done so many of these longer trips. We went to the Isle of Wight. Some of the guys went over to Carnarvon. Lots of controlled airspace transits, and every time you do it and it works, and they let you through, and you feel like you've kind of shown yourself in a reasonably good light, it boosts your confidence and makes you feel like, I can do this. This is no big deal.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was going to ask you about the integrated course, actually, Rory. What are the pros and cons of that course, would you say?
Well, for me, the biggest pro of doing it integrated was that it was going to be really intense, and it was incredibly intense. I'm sitting here looking at my 3 massive lever arch files of all the notes from the ATPLs, and I hope I never have to look at them again. But it was all condensed. I knew it was going to be about a year. I mean, in the end, it was 12 to 14 months, but only because of COVID delays. It would have been done in less than a year had it not been for that. And it was effectively a full-time job for that length of time, and that's how I kind of treated it. Studying all day, more revision in the evening, same again tomorrow, more study at the weekend, and flying in between. And I knew that at my age, and given that I'd been out of higher education for that length of time, I needed to do it in that sort of way. If I tried to do the exams and do a PPL whilst doing a job, I think life would have moved on, and it would have taken an absolute inordinate length of time, and I probably would have got bogged down in the study and possibly just not managed to get through it. So there are advantages of both, integrated and modular, and lots of people have got really strong opinions one way or the other. I obviously didn't do it modular, so I don't know how that goes, but integrated worked really well for me, and it's worked well for the other guys on my course. And I think there's a lot to be said for it. It's the first chance to do an integrated commercial helicopter course in the UK, the course that I was on, and now HC2 is running at the moment, and there's going to be more next year as well. So it's an option for people now, which I think is great.
Yeah. How did you find the transition from fixed wing to rotary? Was that a massive leap for you?
Yeah, it was actually. It's funny because when we first started flying, it was like January last year, and it was cold and windy. I mean, nearly every day we flew was like sort of almost on the limits for the wind in the helicopter, which is about 30 knots. We don't go even with an instructor if it's above 30. And it was a real challenge. And I, probably a bit youthful exuberance, maybe a certain degree of arrogance, thought, well, I can fly an aeroplane. I've got 140 hours on planes. This can't be that hard. I must be able to pick it up. I'll probably get it before the other guys. And boy, was I in for a shock. It is just a completely different ball game. It's all different motor skills. It handles completely differently. You have to think about lots of different things. I remember in the aeroplane, the flight's not over till you've pulled it to a halt and put the parking brakes on and shut the engine down, obviously. But the taxi process is generally a little bit more relaxing than the landing. Whereas in the helicopter, the taxiing and the hovering bits where you've really got to be on your A game above anything else. So it was very different, and I struggled with that a bit, and I had a chat with plain old Ben, said to him, "Why am I finding this so difficult?" And he said, "Well, just go easy on yourself, keep going, and you'll get there eventually." And he was right, and the instructors, they said the same thing. We sort of plugged away at it, but it was very different. I think in the end, the biggest help the aeroplane time has done for me is with the radio and the confidence with controlled airspace and navigating and just time in the air, just time in the cockpit, being in charge of an aircraft and all that sort of stuff. That's really what the biggest help of the plane time was for me.
Actually, one of the things I noticed, Rory, on your videos is you are a user of Sky Demon. Am I correct? Yeah. It's a brilliant app. I use myself on the sim when I'm here at home because it ties in with the X-plane. But do you find that one of the kind of better platforms to use for flight planning and training?
Yeah, I love Sky Demon. I've used it ever since I started flying in the microlight. It's a brilliant tool. It's dead easy to use, and I highly recommend it. HeliCentre use Runway HD on their school iPads, and I think the primary reason is because you can install the actual CAA charts, and also more importantly for helicopters, the Ordnance Survey 1 in 50,000 maps, which go into real detail, which is important if you're trying to land in a confined area or in a pub garden or something. You really want to be able to see all the sort of really extreme detail, which is not as important for anybody who's flying around in a plane from airport to airport or whatever. So they're both great bits of software, but yeah, I still use Sky Demon now for a lot of my planning, and I always have it with me on my phone or on an iPad. I wouldn't go flying without it. The chart's great. You've got to be able to know how to use a chart and how to navigate in the sort of old school way, but the amount of capacity it frees up to keep looking out the window and to concentrate on making the right calls and knowing exactly where you are, awareness of airspace and all the rest of it. It's a vital tool, and I just wouldn't go flying without it.
So from your training then, from all aspects of the training you've done, are there any kind of memorable moments that really stand out, apart from obviously solo, because that's probably the most memorable, but are there any other kind of moments that you stand out you will never forget?
The hard thing is nailing it down. I don't think there's been a flight I've gone on where I've not at one point or another thought, this is fantastic. I get such a huge buzz from it. It's the little things. That moment, calling my parents and telling them that I'd got my license was pretty epic. The heli lanes was fantastic. I mean, that, flying along the Thames, when I lived in London for 18 months and I used to walk along the side of the Thames and I'd see helicopters flying around, and I never really thought it would ever be me one day. So that was amazing. The trip to the Isle of Wight we did, that was, I said it at the furthest south I've ever been on an airplane. Someone said, "Didn't you go to Australia on your honeymoon?" But I wasn't flying the plane. So yeah, it's just been great. It's been a fantastic experience. Every step of the way, all the little tiny milestones you make when you make your first landing and you're wobbling all over the place and you get it down on the skids, you think, yes, done it. And obviously learning to hover is a big one, because that initially just seems impossible, and then it may take hours. It did for me, and eventually something clicks and you think, if I do less, this sort of works better. So yeah, it's been fantastic, and now I'm starting. Well, I'm partway through the type conversion course onto the R44, which I'm really enjoying, because that's a new challenge. Now I've got hydraulics, and it goes a bit faster, so I've had to change from an 80 knot brain to a 100 knot brain and all that sort of stuff. So it's that's one of the best things about aviation, is every single flight you go on, there's something new. Even flying the same route through East Midlands that you've done before, and you know they're going to tell you not above 2,000 feet, remain east of the M1. You just know they're going to say it. But every time the weather's slightly different, the conditions back at the airfield slightly different, there's somebody else out in the circuit you have to work around. It's always new, and that is exciting.
So you obviously flown the Cadbury, and you're learning at the moment on the R44, aren't you? Like you said, is there another helicopter kind of in the kind of grand scheme of things that you'd like to get type rated on as well, or be able to fly?
Well, how long have you got? The Heli Centre have just got themselves a very nice matte black 109S Grand, which I'm hopefully going to have a go in at some point fairly soon. So that'll be fantastic. Flying the Bolko 105 is a bit of a bucket list item for me. I don't think there are very many of them left in the country, but because that was the aircraft that sort of started all of this, and I've had this photograph which you showed earlier on my desk all the way through all the exam study, and in the darkest days of winter when it was raining and I was miserable, I used to look at that and think, come on Rory, get on with it, this is what this is all about. So I'd love to have a go at one of those. But I mean, the EC-135, the 145, a bit of heli-med action, the police, search and rescue, all of that would be absolutely fantastic.
Also, just going on about kind of the YouTube channel, Rory on Air. Obviously, I mean, I subscribe. I know Nev subscribes as well to that. How did the Rory on Air come about? You know, where did the kind of idea to have your own YouTube page with all your own videos and stuff on? The idea to start the channel, or the idea to start the website? The idea to start the channel, the YouTube channel.
Well, that, as I say, it was when I started, when I got to the end of the microlight training. I think that the first 2 videos on my channel, which were appallingly bad, I'm embarrassed to watch them again now, were my 2 cross-country qualifying flights to Ince and Blackpool. And I filmed those with one camera and the cockpit audio, and then, you know, I kind of got a taste for it after that. And every time I make a video since, I always try and introduce a new technique, because I did a TV and radio production degree at university in Sunderland, and it was meant to be TV and radio, but because I was a teenager and was a bit of I want to be the, you know, big I am at uni sort of thing, and I knew a bit about radio and I was already involved in the BBC, I just focused all my efforts on the radio station, and I was kind of the guy from radio, and I just didn't bother with TV because it seemed like a massive faff, and editing's a pain in the backside and it takes ages, and why would you want to have to light something and build a set and faff about with your background going off and all the rest of it when you can just grab a microphone and get on with it? You know, radio is obviously the way to go. Do you know what I mean? All this trouble.
Amen to that. Yeah.
But then but then eventually, you know, you sort of get bitten by the bug. And actually, I love video editing now. It's a really creative thing to do. And I kind of, when I made that video outside the BBC saying I'm leaving, it was kind of, I'm leaving the BBC and I'm sort of leaving YouTube, because I thought, well, I'm not going to have any time to edit anything when I'm doing this course. And I also had no idea whether or not Heli Centre would be amenable to allowing me to film anything or make any content that involved their aircraft. So I thought, well, this may be it, at the very least, until years down the line I've got disposable income again and can start flying the microlights, which I fully intend to do, by the way. And you know, so I just sort of thought, well, that's the end of it. But every time I do a video, I try to introduce something new, whether it's some sort of effect or a new bit of music or new edit technique or whatever. And you know, it just takes an inordinate amount of time. I mean, it's days and days and days to get a video down to the 19 or so minutes that I'm happy with, that I'm happy to let sit on the internet forevermore.
Yeah, well, I mean, we very much feel your pain there, to be fair, Rory. We did a Christmas show that was, I think, was about 1 hour and 45 minutes long when it actually went out. I think John, our producer, totaled up, I think we'd spent about 90 hours work to actually make that 1 hour 45 minute video. It's absolutely crazy. You know, Yeah, we're going to go to some listeners' questions now, actually. And one that really, the geek in me is really sort of perks up on this one. This one's from Tony S. And he's saying that, Rory, when you were at the BBC, were you ever used as an impromptu aviation expert? It seems like there isn't much of that going on these days.
I've got two stories about that, actually. One of them was when I was very new. I was in my first week or two at the BBC World Service in London, and the World Service is a fantastic thing, but it's very much, good day, this is the BBC Home Service. We're terribly posh, and we do everything properly.
I don't know what you mean.
Everyone's got their job, and if it's not your job, you ruddy well shut up and let us do our job. And the technical people are the oily rag engineering technical people, and the presenters and the reporters are gods, and everybody lets them do their thing. So I'm sat there in this sort of officey area where the technical people live. There's sort of like a man cave full of old 1960s equipment. And this guy comes in, I can't remember his name, but he'd been a reporter at World Service for probably 20 or 30 years. And he came in and asked me to edit a voice piece, which is like a 40-second, recording about a news story. And it was to do with the Air France crash.
Oh, wow.
And he'd said something in his piece like, there was a blockage in the pilot tube. And I said to him, I said, I'm terribly sorry, but you're going to have to go and re-record this. And he said, why? Nothing wrong with it? Yeah. And I said to him, well, I'm afraid there is. You've referred to the pilot tube, and it's a pitot tube. So that's just a mistake. You're going to have to go and do it again. So he huffed off out of the room. My mates who sat in there with me, they said, God, you're ballsy, Rory. Why didn't you tell him that? I said, well, it's just wrong. He'll get laughed out of court if that goes out on air. It's just a mistake. So off he went. And he came back about 20 minutes later with a new recording. And he said to me, I think I owe you an apology, dear boy.
Wow.
It turns out you're correct. And I've re-recorded the voice piece if you wouldn't mind editing that. And while I was editing it, he said to me, do you mind me asking how you knew that? So wow. I was like, well, I'm a bit of an aviation geek, and it's kind of an obvious one when you're in that circle. So that was one time. And then much more recently, when I was working at 5 Live, I think there was a story about an aircraft that had a bit of a crash landing at a grass runway, which was parallel to a road. I can't remember where it was. It was somewhere in England. It was a light aircraft, like a PA-28 or something, had hit some wires, I think, and gone into a grass runway. And the Jeremy Vine program, who I'd been working on the production team for a few months prior, called me up and said, will you come on and talk to Jeremy? And I'm a massive Jeremy fan, so I went on, and he's like, so Rory, good to have you on the program. Tell me, first of all, is aviation as dangerous as everybody thinks? And I was like,
no.
No, it's not, Jeremy.
Good impression, by the way. Good impression.
Thanks very much. I pride myself on making a good impression.
Quite.
So yeah, that was a good one, good fun as well. But no, maybe that's something to carve out in the future once I actually become an expert, which will probably take 30 years or so.
We were actually considering at one stage having a segment on the program called Nev's Media Fails, where we would highlight how many media fails there had been this week, whether it's identifying the wrong aircraft or the wrong airfield or whatever. But we decided it'd be so many, we'd actually overrun the program.
We'd have no show left. Yeah, absolutely.
Amount. But just going back to the chat room for a second, Chris Marsh asks, if you had to have an engine failure in one of the aircraft you were flying, would you prefer that to be in a fixed wing aircraft or rotary?
Oh,
that's a great question, Chris. The thing is about helicopters, they have got the gliding characteristics of a brick.
Yes,
but
a house brick, to be precise.
But you can get them into a tiny spot. So if you're not needing to glide very far because there's a tennis court or a football pitch, in the chin bubble, then, if you do it right, you're home in a boat and you'll be able to walk away from it and use the aircraft again. Whereas, one way or another, the aeroplane's going to be knackered. If you're more than a mile offshore and you aren't wearing a life jacket and don't fancy getting your feet wet, I'd take the aeroplane all day. Because you might actually make the beach. So it's a difficult one. It's part of the training, as you guys all know, that we fly defensively, and you're constantly sort of looking for somewhere that you might be able to go, and and thinking about that. And we're a bit more cautious about flying over things that wouldn't make a happy landing surface in a single engine helicopter, because the glide is much less. But in all honesty, having had the training I've had, I feel confident that I could make a decent fist of it in either of them. And I genuinely think all the stuff about helicopters not being safe is nonsense. I mean, Igor Sikorsky said himself, if you're in peril, an aeroplane can come and drop flowers on you, but a helicopter can land and save your life. And we can now add winching into that as well. So
questions from the chat room to get through. I've got one here, and then Nev's got a few as well. But we've got a quick one from Jonathan Warner, who is our military expert fan, or military aviation fan. He's asking, despite never getting into the military, was there a type that you specifically wanted to fly?
Good question. Well, the Lynx was always a pretty exciting looking aircraft when I was younger. So I think probably the Lynx. I watched. There's a movie that a lot of you aviation dudes will have possibly seen. It's called Firebirds, Wings of the Apache, and it's a Nicolas Cage movie. It's like a sort of knockoff version of Top Gun, but for the Apache. And it's pretty naff in many respects, but there's some nice flying in, and there's a lovely MD 500 as well, which I would have happily have a go in one of those. So I guess, though, Apache or the Lynx probably.
Wow.
Next question from Mark Priestley. Mark says, what was the hardest part of your training?
Trying to do everything at once, I think. Each element of it is all well and good, when you're sort of being taught it and trying to learn things, but getting myself psyched up for the skill test at the end, the CPL skill test, where I knew that I had to act like a captain, I had to be spot on with the navigating, I had to be within plus or minus 100 feet, plus or minus 10 knots. And actually the school had taught us, plus or minus 100 feet isn't good enough. You need to be plus or minus 0, which is good because, train hard, test easy is a good thing to have in your mind. But, to begin with, the idea of being able to fly straight and level is daunting. And then throw in trying to read the map and, what, you want me to talk on the radio at the same time? You must be having a laugh.
Oh, come on, you're a broadcaster. You do that in your sleep.
Yeah, I know, but it's a completely different language, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
The principle is talking on the radio, but once you've got to know what you've got to say, I mean, what do you mean a basic service?
Actually, Mark asked another question as well. He's sort of saying, what would be your ideal job in the world of helicopters? What would you most love to do?
I think that's pretty easy. I would love to do search and rescue. The idea of kind of getting back to the island community and offshore, the coast and the sea. The camaraderie that I had with my colleagues in the studio at the BBC was amazing, and I can imagine that the camaraderie that you have in a 4-crew search and rescue aircraft where everyone relies on each other, so that you can safely pluck somebody off a sinking trawler in the middle of the night in the dark in a Force 5. That would focus the mind, and the machinery that they use for it is incredible. So search and rescue is something I aspire to do eventually. HEMS, helimed stuff, I would love to do that. The idea of landing in a different place all the time and the kind of make it up as you go along element to it, obviously all within the sort of safe bounds, but you've got to be reasonably creative, and I like to think that I'm a reasonably creative person, so the idea of being able to mold a bit of creativity and a bit of flying procedurally into one thing would be fantastic. But to be honest, if somebody rang me up and said, do you want a job, and it ticks the boxes helicopters and they pay me for it, I'm there. So it's I wouldn't say no to anything.
Captain Al says in the chat room, says that SAR, well, there goes the life insurance.
Right. I see.
But he also says, now it's possible, when does Rory plan to land on Auskerry?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that is a major bucket list item. Even just the fly to Orkney was something that I was planning on doing in the aeroplane. I was kind of working myself up to that. But now what I'd love to do on part of my hour building, once the COVID restrictions lift and hopefully we get into summer, is to get in an aircraft, probably the 44, because it's a bit quicker, and take Lizzie up to Orkney and hopefully fly out to Auskerry and get get the picture that I've stared at of the Balco 105, but with me standing in front of a helicopter that I actually got there in front of Aylesbury Lighthouse. That would be cool.
We look forward to that picture. Rory.
Absolutely, yeah. Make sure you send it in to us. Actually,
make sure
that'd
you
be
get
great.
that exact shot as well.
Yeah,
yeah.
No, I'll do my best. I think the picture of the bill might be a bit of a worry, but
right,
we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
It's minor details. It's all details. Okay, well, look, Rory, it's been a real pleasure to have you on. Thank you so very much for being so generous with your time today. It's honestly, I've had a lot of fun. I don't know about you guys.
But we do have to ask
Brilliant.
Rory the final
of course,
question,
yes, we must do that.
the
Yes.
question.
This could be interesting, seeing as he's
Which
into
we've
helicopters.
given you no notice of whatsoever, Rory, I'm afraid. But
Oh,
if you
no.
had if you had the
Get your
chance
checkbook
to
and credit
fly
cards out.
any aircraft at all, so it could be fixed wing, rotary, GA, corporate jet, commercial airliner, anything at all, either current or military or past, anything at all, what would it be?
I know that everyone probably says this, and it probably shows you'll probably think, oh, this is a lack of forethought from Rory, but I have to say the Spitfire, because it's so iconic.
Yeah.
And it's got such an amazing sound. Every time I hear one, I've heard a few over Leicestershire, and our head's hanging out the window, and I'm shouting at Lizzie, "It's a Spitfire! It's a Spitfire!" And she says, "How do you know?" I said, "Have you got ears?"
Like, yeah, and why should I care? That sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And they're so rare, and you know they're such a beautiful aircraft, and they represent so much of what's fantastic about this country. And I would just love to, I would just love to fly one of those. So, okay, it's not a helicopter, but yeah, bucket list item, get me in a Spitfire.
But you can do. Just all you got to do is find $8,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
Well, I know, but I could probably take a jet ranger to Orkney for the summer holidays if I had £8,000 spare. So,
Yeah. I wonder which one I'd rather do. Yeah.
well,
Absolutely.
which one am I going to be able to sell to my wife? That's
right.
the key question.
Yeah. There is that. Yeah.
Do you want to go to Le Touquet in an EC 120, Lizzie, or do you want me to go up in a Spitfire for half an hour and lord it up?
Yeah. Yes. I suspect a negative response forthcoming.
That's why God invented joint accounts.
Right. Wow. God, you really know no fear,
Yeah.
do you, Carlos?
Sorry, she's not watching.
My wife she's watching downstairs, and she's sitting in the room that has the internet router, so she could
Right.
literally pull
Yeah.
the plug on me
Fall,
right now.
fall off air any minute. Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, I'd forgotten, Nev, how good that interview was with Rory. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? We set it up quite late on, but no, he's a very convivial chap, very entertaining fella, and I really enjoyed listening to his progression from, working from the BBC, then into light aircraft and helicopters, and now he's got his commercial pilot's license,
Yeah.
of course. So that's absolutely brilliant, and he's got a new son, baby Jack, came along this year as well. So the lad is going to be very busy.
He was very
I
busy indeed.
suspect.
Yeah, absolutely. A very busy 2022 for him, no doubt. As I say, flying those weird things from Hogwarts, that's where they're made, right?
Well, no, it's mad, isn't it? I still don't understand how the whole thing works.
Me neither.
I've looked at videos and talked to people about it, but how helicopters fly is still a mystery to me.
I have to say, producer John has tried to explain it to me at length, because he said, it's all about the physics and all that kind of thing, but I'm still completely lost. So, well, I'm glad somebody knows what they're doing with it anyway. Now, one of the segment that I've chosen actually was a series that we did a while back. Now, we're very lucky that we've been allowed to borrow Captain Nick from the Airline Pilot Guide for some great interviews over the last couple of years, actually. Most recently with Mike Wildman, who was the amputee acrobatic pilot. That was a great series. I think you went to... Where did you go down to film that, Nev? That was amazing.
Went down to Henstridge Airfield, just in Gloucestershire there, and it was a beautiful day down there, actually. It was fantastic. So
I was going to say, it was the only sunny day that the UK
nice
had,
change.
I think, last year. Yeah.
We had a film outside.
Yeah.
But no, Mike and Nick was superb. And that, of course, they had flown together previously on the A340 as well, which made the whole engagement
bet.
even better. So
Indeed.
that was great. But but your one here, Matt, is very interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was a series of interviews that we did with Nick. It was unusual in the fact that we weren't, because it was right in the middle of a very difficult time. Obviously, it was right in the middle of the pandemic when we filmed this particular thing, and it's the first time that we've done an interview of this size, if you like, down the line, and it was absolutely fascinating. Captain Nick caught up with the legend that is George Lee, MBE, and we were learning all about his amazing military and mostly towards the end, obviously, his incredible gliding career. I mean, he was a world champion more than once. Absolutely fascinating fellow. And we caught up with him. The part that I've chosen for today was where he was telling us all about his time teaching Prince Charles to fly a glider.
Now, when you got back to the UK, you were in the Nationals, placed second, but more importantly, perhaps, the country honoured you for your achievements, firstly with the Royal Aero Club's Gold Medal, which I might point out is only awarded for outstanding achievements. And you joined the ranks of previous aviators like the Wright brothers, Blériot, Alcock and Brown, even the Apollo 11 astronauts. A fine company. That was a remarkable thing to be given, yes?
Yes, I was honoured to get a lot of different honours, medals, Nick. I don't have an awful lot of huge memory points from those presentations, apart from they were given by different members of the royal family, many of them. Prince Charles gave a couple, Prince Andrew gave a couple, and Prince Philip gave, I believe from memory, the Air League Founders Medal. So that was absolutely wonderful. But one award was the MBE, and interestingly, it was actually awarded on the civil list as opposed to the military list. So Maren and my mother and I, of course, in my best uniform, went off to Buckingham Palace to receive that, and that was a great honour. But no tremendous memories from the day. A lot of people were getting a lot of different things. So, yeah, but nonetheless, great honour.
Well, while we're on the subject of the royal family, 78 saw you at RAF Bicester for a number of flights with royalty, and you took Prince Charles, then, I guess, a reasonably young man, the heir to the throne, up in a Grob, I believe. Did he enjoy himself?
He did, Nick. It was a private visit, so the man could actually relax. He didn't have a lot of hangers-on. It was very informal. I remember waiting out by the entrance gates at Bicester for his arrival and looking and seeing this open-top Aston Martin coming down the road. And there was HRH at the wheel with his private detective lounging on the back seat. But the intention was to do a 100-kilometer triangular cross-country course. And it would have been wonderful. I felt very disappointed because the British weather just did not cooperate. There was no way we were going cross-country, just impossible. And I often wondered what it would have been like had we gone and landed out, and curious people might have come and said, has anybody ever told you you look remarkably like Prince Charles?
Oh, that would have been great.
But anyway, we did a lot of aerobatics. At one stage I thought, dare I do a beat up with the heir to the throne? Well, never mind, my career is at stake, but here we go. So blasted off down the airfield and did a beat up at very low level, pulled up and landed. On one downwind landing, again below normal minimum circling altitude, I felt, got a little bit of lift here. Dare I throw a turn? Oh, what the heck, I will. And it was enough, and it hooked into it and it developed. And we actually climbed up to 3,000 feet from fairly low altitude. So at least it gave him a little taste of what gliding is about. He loved it. I think he really enjoyed it. And he's got a wonderful sense of humor, Prince Charles. We went in for our lunch break and I was ushering him into what is normally the briefing room, and all laid out with the finest silver and linen and everything else for HRH. He stopped at the doorway, had a quick look around and turned around. And he said to me, I suppose it's always like this, isn't it? I thought that was priceless. No,
very good indeed.
It was a lovely visit, Nick.
can I move forward now to the defence of your World Championship, this time in France? Unless there's anything else you particularly want to cover in the lead up to that. But how did that competition go?
I had the same regular loyal crew chief, a different crew member, but they knew each other well. No problems there. We went to a French Air Force base called Romorantin for the pre-practice period practice. So I had a lot of time, and the weather was dreadful. It rained and rained. So we polished and fettled and polished and fettled. The glider was perfect. And towards the very last day, suddenly the sun came out. And wow, we got the glider ready, towed out to the launch point. The French towed their gliders out. There was a French civil gliding club there as well. And they parked them and off they went. This was lunchtime. This is the French lunch. It's very serious. And the tug pilot came out and he parked his plane and he was about to go off for lunch. I couldn't believe it. I went over and said, please, just one tow before lunch. And bless him, he gave in. And I went and did 600 kilometers or something. And the French came out after their lunch and flew 250, 300. So I do recall that. The event itself was probably the most straightforward of the World Championships. The weather was generally consistent, not booming, strong weather, but good, solid, consistent weather. On one memorable day, I was the only person of any class, there were 3 classes by now, to actually get home. And that was the most marginal final glide I've ever had in my life. We topped up at the top of a fire that was going. Other gliders are way down low. There's no way they're getting home. And I milked it for all I could and set off for Châteauroux, which was the big French airfield with monster runways and parallel taxiways. I had a Belgian open class pilot off my left wing, but he was a bit lower and he wasn't going to make it for sure. And I didn't think I was going to make it, and I just pressed on, looking at the instruments, any movement of the air, just gently following it, until finally I saw I was going to creep over the airfield boundary. The only problem was there's still 2 kilometers of concrete before the finish line. Minor problem. So I just, squeezed the buttocks and carried on and on, floating until finally, I'm not going to scrape the belly of the glider. I just have to drop the gear now. So I dropped it and touched and just rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled. It's fortunately a smooth surface. And even able to apply a tiny bit of air brake having crossed the finish line. So that was a very memorable day.
I was going to call you a bit of a show off there, Josh, but that is remarkable. That should be squeeze it over the line like that. That's brilliant.
The final day worked as it should work. My open class teammate, the same guy, he was out of contention. So he was quite legally helping me to maintain my overall lead. So he was a certain number of kilometers ahead, and by code, he was reporting back thermal strengths. So that was helpful to a reasonable degree at least. And I think I got 3rd for the day, which was enough to cement the overall victory.
Now, you quite rightly received many accolades for your 2nd World Championship in a row. But the icing on the cake, perhaps, you were invited to the palace again, this time to dine with the royal family. What a lovely thing that must have been.
Now, that was very, very special. That actually happened in '79, and the telegram arrived when we were in Cyprus, I recall. So I flew back, and this was a very different event and so much more meaningful, to be perfectly honest. There were 10 guests, and then, of course, the Queen and Prince Philip. So we waited in this huge, big lounge room waiting for Her Majesty to arrive, and heard the corgis yapping, here she comes. So in she comes, and there's a little group around her, and every so often one person would get a gentle tug on the elbow, and that person would be just slid out of the group, and another person slid in. The lunch itself, of course, was special in a lovely little room. I was seated next to the Bishop of Oxford, I recall. But the one thing I do remember, I was feeling pretty nervous. I really was. But the one thing I do remember was a very animated conversation between Claire Francis, the yachtswoman of fame, with Prince Philip. She was certainly not nervous. But then afterwards, after the lunch, this is where it got special for me, because we had the same setup after the lunch in this lounge room. And to this day, I cannot remember how it happened, but somehow I ended up with just the Queen and myself side by side at the front window of this lounge room, this big bay window looking up the mall. And we were watching preparations being made for a state visit the following week. And we were just chatting as you would to a neighbor over a fence. It was absolutely remarkable. So that was just so wonderful. She's a wonderful woman, absolutely wonderful.
Well, George, it seems that the RAF, in their wisdom, were going to give one of their finest pilots a ground tour. But then again, if you're going to have a ground tour, the one you were given has to be, an absolutely wonderful thing to do. You were on the tactical leadership program in Germany, weren't you?
Yes, Nick, you've summed that up very well. It was indeed a very special tour, quite extraordinary in so many ways. Firstly, well, it was on a German Air Force base itself, under the unit TLP under a German commandant with a multinational staff, one Belgian, German, and then Brits and Americans. The TLP was actually under AFSI as opposed to NATO. That's Allied Air Forces Central Europe. The main difference being that AFSI didn't have any money. But anyway, the program itself was superb. There's no other way to describe it. And prior to going on staff, I actually went and did the course myself with my regular navigator. We went over there to the base, which was called Jever, up in the far north of Germany, not that far from the North Sea, actually. And the course was multi-mission. We had 6 air defense aircraft on each course and then 12 ground attack aircraft. And we started off with the gentle stuff, a bit of medium level, dissimilar air combat, all of that sort of stuff before bringing the serious stuff on down into the low level regime. And the air defenders would be mounting their cap, waiting for the ground attack package to come through. And when they see them, launch at them. So the mission intensity and complexity developed as the course went on. And towards the latter part of the course, they actually brought in the American aggressors, which was tremendous because the aggressors is a specialist American unit flying F-5s, painted in full Soviet color scheme. And the tactics that they employed were Soviet tactics, and they were very disciplined in doing that. So from a training value perspective, the aggressors were magnificent unit to train in, very, very realistic. But having mentioned the aggressor, there was one incident we had when I was on staff. Actually, the aggressors were out there on their own little cap waiting for the ground attack package. And one of the aggressor pilots, he didn't see the package until very late. It was visual look out. The F-5 doesn't have look down radar. He saw them very late, rolled over, pulled down to get in behind them. Only he misjudged the pull down and he overcooked it, didn't pull hard enough, I guess. And he saw the ground looming up at a rather remarkably disturbing rate. And he carried on and he actually glanced the earth. He impacted, but only a glancing blow, back up and ejected.
Oh, good Lord. What an amazing thing. Within an inch of death.
Well, quite so. I don't know, incredible. But the course itself, I could feel myself when I did the course getting sharper each mission. It was that environment, just tremendous flying, exciting, adrenaline pumping flying.
And flying with some of the best pilots picked from each of the air forces.
Oh, normal squadron operational pilots, I would say. But it was an environment where they were away from all the squadron pressures and stuff, and we gelled, bonded well together, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And an amazing variety of aircraft types actually would come on the course. A huge number, from A-10 Warthogs all the way up F-15s, even F-1s, and everything in between. And these nations were encouraged to please bring along two-seaters, so the staff members could actually get airborne on these missions, because otherwise one is relying on pilot reports, which probably a little bit less than fully accurate at times.
So you got some flying in.
I got to fly in a tremendous range of two-seat aircraft.
Excellent.
Harrier, Mirage, F-16. My favorite by far was the F-15. I fell in love with that aircraft and I thought, oh, why didn't we buy the F-15? It was just gorgeous. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. So a great experience. And in between courses, we were required to keep current on our own types. So I went down to Wildenrath and flew the F4. The squadrons were given that little bit of extra hours allowance, and I alternated between 19 and 92 squadron, and they were very generous and in hosting me. So I'm very appreciative of that.
Well, it sounded like a great time you had. You were able to get into the American PX and buy all their wonderful steaks and even come home with a duty-free car. I didn't feel jealous at all up there in northern Scotland. So the TLP was actually not far from where you were going to fly your third World Championship. So that must have been quite handy.
Wasn't that George Lee interview fantastic? I mean, it's just one of a series of parts that we did, and of course we had to get equipment down to him in Australia as well. I seem to recall.
Yes, that
microphones and all sorts of bits and pieces.
I know this is the trouble, isn't it? He did have a webcam. That was one thing that was it, but it was quite the technical challenge, and I was delighted it turned out the way it did. And of course, don't forget, I mean, because we've got a great series of interviews there. That, as I say, it was the first time that I had to do something on my own. This first one that you'd not been involved in, Nev, to be fair. But there was this, as I say, of course we had John Hutchinson, didn't we? That's available for you to watch on YouTube, of course, and the George Lee series as well. That's all available. And there's one more, isn't there? I seem to remember.
Yeah, there was the big one, the first one we did with Sir Richard Johns.
Of course it was, yes.
Former Chief of the Air Staff. So that was fantastic. And I'm looking at comments even now. People are still looking at it on YouTube, and there's new comments going on there all the time, and they are all very positive.
Absolutely, it's been a great series of interviews, as I say, and George Lee was no exception. So we'll move on now, and I think we're off to the boys in the States now, aren't we?
We are, yes. So let's go to Armando and see what his favourite was of 2021.
Okay, as we're talking about favorite segments for 2021, it was actually pretty hard to pick them. I think the five of us had to fight for which ones were our favorites. Carlos and I were having lunch yesterday, and we were talking about how this year we feel that as a show we really took the show to a new level as far as the quality of guests that we had, the quality of production that Nev and the team was putting together. But I think one of my favorite episodes from this year was the Around the World special. It wasn't planned as a special. It turned out to be a special. But our guests that day were Shasta Weiss and Travis Ludlow, who both flew around the world. And Shasta was the youngest woman to do so, and Travis ended up breaking that record when he was 18 years old this year. So I thought it was really interesting to just watch the two of them and kind of listen to the two of them talk about their experiences, their shared experiences, and then how their trips were just a little bit different from each other. So that was, I think, my favorite segment for 2021. So here it is.
So I suppose the question asked, I suppose, is, well, obviously we'll talk about the solo flight a bit later, but where did the aviation bug start with you?
Oh God, I don't have your traditional aviation story. Quite honestly, I grew up terrified of airplanes, and really the reason for that is the only time I would see an airplane was usually on the television because of an aircraft accident. So in my head, I just thought airplanes, that's what they do, they crash. And for me, I tried to avoid flying. And that changed when I had graduated from high school. I was 18 years old, boarding a Delta Airlines flight, and it was the first time I had ever traveled on an airplane. Well, really, the first time I ever traveled was when my family left as refugees from Afghanistan. So this was the first time where I could really understand what was going on. And there is a passenger back in like seat 30 something, middle seat. I fell in love with aviation as soon as it was wheels up. The aviation bug had bit me, and it's just been this love for flying ever since.
What was the first aircraft you flew yourself in?
A Cessna 172, which was a trainer at my university. Yeah.
So you hit the 172s before the 150s.
You went the other way around.
I know. Yeah,
Shasta, well, we have you on, actually, and we have Travis on. Now, Travis flew a 172, a Jet A powered with a diesel engine 172 around the world. Now, you flew around the world in what kind of airplane?
A Beechcraft Bonanza A36, BE36.
Okay, so Travis was telling us about choosing a Jet A powered airplane. I'm taking advantage of having both of you guys here so you guys can compare notes.
Yeah, no. Of course.
So he said one of the challenges was finding avgas, and you flew in a Bonanza that is an avgas powered airplane.
Right.
Would you have done that different nowadays, or looking back?
As I was looking into an airplane to fly around the world, I heard a lot from past Earth rounders. If you can avoid avgas or going into a country where they're kind of telling you that they're going to have avgas, avoid it. And they were very keen on telling me to skip Egypt if I could, because apparently there was, in the past, people who've flown into Egypt, they were promised avgas, but it was never there once they showed up. So I had a lot of hesitation going into it, but I was very fortunate because ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, they were a big sponsor of the global flight. And I had met a lot of the diplomats from the countries that I was flying into. And I just remember going into their offices and saying, hey, so about avgas, it's going to be there, right? And they're like, yeah, of course. Don't worry about that. So having those conversations with the government ahead of time really ensured that I would find avgas along my stop. But yes, I've heard stories about people, being stuck, and I can't even imagine. Well, I have some questions for Travis. Congratulations, Travis. I'm so proud of you. You're so accomplished at such a young age, and I kind of know what you went through, and I give you props. The one thing that in the Earth Rounder community, when we've always gotten together, we've always asked each other, would you do it again? And I'm just curious to know what your answer is.
Thank you so much. I think I definitely would do it again. I actually like to do it again in a electric aircraft, maybe break the world record of the first flight around the world in an electric aircraft. So that's definitely something I'd like to do. Yeah.
Oh, very good. My answer to that was no. Like, unless if it's a jet or an airplane that, no way. There's no need. But good for you. Really, that's great.
Yeah, I definitely want to do it in quite probably a few years in the future. I want to have a good break.
Yeah, of course.
A good time to forget the difficulties of the trip.
Very good.
Indeed. Travis, would you love to be do what Armando does basically and sort of fly commercial jet? Would you love to be a pilot? For real?
Yes, absolutely. I definitely want to continue to work in aviation, and definitely want a career in that, work professionally in that. So yeah, that's definitely something I'm very interested in doing. I'm just not sure where I'm going to do that, where I'm going to do that with, or who yet.
What would be that one piece of advice that you would both give a young kind of either a school leaver
somebody
or someone
who's
still at school,
who's maybe watch this or has been following both of your journeys?
What's
over
that
the
one
years?
piece of advice that you would both give a young person?
For me, it was definitely a confidence issue because I hadn't grown up around aviation and I came into it very late. So my advice, whether aviation's been a part of your life or not, is to get involved. And I mean that in the sense of There's so much virtual opportunities now. If you can go to a conference or go to your local airport, introduce yourself. I mean, we've all been there where we've been at an event for the very first time as aviators. Whether you are, whether it doesn't matter where you fall in aviation, everyone has had that moment where they've gone to an event with no experience and all this passion. So we get it. Go out there, introduce yourself, make friends, have conversations, really make aviation a part of your community, because it really comes down to, we are a very small community and we all love aviation so much. So just make that effort, get involved, and make it part of your everyday. That really helped me a lot with my confidence.
And Travis.
So what I'd say is, and especially to the younger generation, and especially as well aspiring pilots, is to continue to just keep aiming for your goals and your dreams, and no matter what happens, no matter what events happen in your life that may put you down, no matter what anyone may say, just keep pushing towards your goals, and eventually you can achieve these dreams. I had so many times especially in the UK, I had a lot of people who thought that I was essentially going to kill myself by doing this. People actually told me that directly, and I feel like that's could be part of the UK, is that we're quite old-fashioned pilots here, so it's definitely something quite strange for a lot of these pilots. So, but no matter what happens, just don't let anybody put you down. Just keep pushing, keep aiming, and you'll achieve your goals.
Yeah, that really was such a fascinating interview, wasn't it? And it was just, I mean, the guy's so young as well. Travis was just so young.
I can't remember if he has got an aviation license before a driving license. I think he.
Yes,
he
yeah. He's only, in fact, if I remember correctly, because I still follow him on Instagram, I think he has only literally recently just passed his driving test. So he did have his commercial pilot's license before he had his driving license, which just melts my mind.
I know, and I'm hoping to meet up with him again soon, actually, because he's almost a neighbour of mine.
Oh, wow.
In the next village, or a couple of villages down from me, and he flies out of Booker Aerodrome at High Wycombe. So it'd be nice to meet up with him again and find out the latest news that he has to report.
Indeed,
so,
absolutely. And Sheesta was a fantastic interview as well, wasn't she? She was the interaction between both of them actually was fascinating, sort of exchanging stories of that, comparing notes, if you like. Because they've both more or less done a similar challenge. It's just bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the things I like about doing our podcast is that we get the chance to listen to aviators speaking and interacting with each other. And I think it's absolutely fascinating series of conversations that can go on. So, no, it's absolutely brilliant. So, well done to both of them. And thanks to both of them for contributing to the show so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, we're going to go back to the States then. And it's Carlos's turn to let us know which segment was his favourite in 2021.
Now, for me, one of my favourite interviews we had on the show was with Mike Ling from the Blades Aerobatic Display team. And this is a group of guys and ladies who I've seen at various air displays across the UK at various points in the year. They've been really active, especially in before 2019, when they were at the Seething Air Display back in the day when we used to have an air show there. But we got in touch with Mike, and he very kindly came onto the show, and we had a chat with Mike, and it was a great interview. So here it is.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the show Blade 3, aka Mike Ling. Welcome, Mike.
Hello, gents. How you doing?
Very well. Nice to have you on, Mike. How are things where you are in the UK?
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm at a very windy and wet Sywell Aerodrome, which is where the Blades are based. I too live in Buckinghamshire, actually. So when I left home this morning, it was pretty grim, and I didn't expect to fly today. And unfortunately, the 3 flights I had planned got cancelled. So a very wet and windy Northamptonshire where I am right now.
Where did aviation kick off with you?
I grew up in Biggin Hill, which I'm sure most of your listeners know is a very famous Second World War Battle of Britain airfield just outside London. It was very pivotal in the Battle of Britain as a sector station. Every year there was an air show there, the Biggin Hill Air Fair, and I went there from when I was 1 year old right up till I joined the Royal Air Force at 19. But it was around about my third birthday, so give away my age now, 1982, when I saw the Red Arrows, and my mother says that's when I first said I want to be a Red Arrows pilot. So I fell in love with aeroplanes, absolutely. You know, I said I wanted to be a pilot, did what I needed to do at school. I joined the Air Cadets, and then after school, after my A-levels, I joined the Air Force as a direct entrant and started my officer training and flying trainings, which, you know, it was, as a youngster, relatively, it was fantastic. What an experience that was.
So, Mike, how did the move to join the Red Arrows come around?
Well, there are a certain number of criteria you need to have before you can apply to join the Red Arrows. It's completely voluntary. As to be said, you're not posted there. You have to want to do it and put the application in. So these criteria are: you have to have 1,500 hours of fast jet flying, you have to be assessed as above average, and you have to have completed a frontline operational tour. Now, by that, it means, I mentioned already that creamy tour, the being a creamy instructor. So you can get 1,500 hours by being a creamy, but you haven't done your frontline tour, so you're not eligible to apply. So as soon as I was eligible, i.e. year 2 of my time on the front line in the Tornado, I thought, right, I'll put an application in for the Reds now. I've got these criteria ticked off. So I put the application in, not expecting in the slightest to be selected, but I was totally gobsmacked when they invited me forward for the shortlist, which is when they down select the applicants to 9, from about 35 applicants down to 9, and then those 9 go away for a week-long selection process. So I went to this selection process, which at the time was in Cyprus at RAF Akrotiri, and had a week of flying 3 times in the back of the jets, doing a very intense flying test, doing an interview with 3 very senior officers who, you know, threw lots of nasty questions at us, and doing, most importantly, the peer review, peer testing. So you'd meet the team and just socialize with them, interact with them day in, day out. And they could see your entire personality from sort of one end of the spectrum to the other. And then they would choose from those 9, 2 or 3, depending on the need for the following year. So that's how it came about. I applied in my second year on the Tornado, and amazingly, I was completely gobsmacked when I was selected to join.
I mean, you've been very kind and sort of spoken about, obviously, your time with the Red Arrows and things. And Mike has got a really interesting question, actually, saying, so, I mean, the Red Arrows are phenomenal, there is no doubt. But as you've already mentioned, there are sort of other display teams as well. Now, obviously, your current mission, for want of a better word, is with the Blades. I'd be fascinated to sort of hear how the two styles compare, and how things are obviously, you know, it's a different display team, and the differences you've found, really.
What I'd say about all the jet teams around the world is that they're broadly similar, and their mission is generally the same, which is to showcase the best of their service or their country. And I've been very fortunate working a lot with the European teams, the Spanish, the Italians, the French, and working with the US teams and the Canadian team I mentioned already, but also the Russians and the Chinese teams. You know, I've been very fortunate to have worked with them as well. They all do a similar job in promoting their services and their countries. But what is amazing to see is they all have their different attributes. So the aircraft they fly dictates the type of display they fly. So you might see that the Blue Angels fly an incredibly tight display. They fly very, very close together. But the FAA rules on display flying are very different to European rules. So their display is built around those display rules, and likewise the Europeans are the same. One amazing formation that stands out is we were in China doing a display, and the Russians were there, and they had, I think it was a 4-ship of Su-27s and a 5-ship of MiG-29s, but they flew it as a 9-ship display. So if you can picture a Diamond 9, but with the massive Su-27 in among the relatively tiny MiG-29, and they did an amazing display. So the aircraft is different for most display teams. There are some that obviously have the same aircraft, being namely the Italians and the UAE display team have the Mach-E, but they all do different things with those aircraft, and everything stands out brilliantly. But the best thing is meeting the people that do it, is they're all so very proud to display, to showcase their services and their country. So it's been a real privilege for that. When it comes to my day job now, flying with the Blades Aerobatic team, now we are very different. We're a 4-ship civilian piston engine aerobatic team flying aerobatic aircraft. So we are all ex-Red Arrows pilots. That's our unique selling point, if you like. But our primary role is actually offering passenger experiences. So the idea is that people who have seen the Red Arrows often say, well, can I go flying with the Red Arrows? Sadly, the answer is no. It's a military aircraft. We can't, the team can't take people flying. But it was a former Red Arrows leader who set up the Blades back in 2006 and saw a gap in the market. Thought, well, we can offer passenger experiences doing close formation aerobatics. So the Blades was established in 2006 as the world's only aerobatic airline. And that's the day job. We put people in the front of the Extra 300 and we fly them a couple of meters away from their mates going upside down. So it's that is day job. And what we do to generate interest in those passenger experiences is we'll go to air shows and do flying displays. So our display lasts about 15 minutes of four-ship formation. We do lots of gyroscopic aerobatics and synchro pair-esque maneuvers. But the beauty of the Extra 300 is that the display is very tight. There's always something happening in front of the crowd and you can keep it very close. Whereas with the jet displays, they tend to take up quite a lot of airspace and room. So it's very different flying the aircraft because it's designed purely for aerobatics, unlike the Hawk for the Red Arrows, which is designed for weapons training and fast jet training.
Well, wasn't that a great interview with Mike? Fascinating character. And again, another one of these people that's just been so generous with his time, and the stories that you get from these people are phenomenal. And Mike's career has been tremendous, hasn't it?
So we quite like to do a special show every now and again, Nev, and we put an awful lot of work into something quite unique. And this was actually producer John's choice for 2021. And of course, that was the Women in Aviation special.
Yes, it was. And it took a lot of teeing up, but boy, was it worth it. I mean, it was a absolutely fantastic show. Well, I was just in awe of it, sitting downstairs watching it, actually, because obviously Carlos and I weren't on the show.
Yes, we all had a night off. It was lovely. We were sat there watching it. It was truly, truly amazing. As you say, it took a long time to tee everything up. And hosted by Dr. Steph and Jodie Ruger, and of course Ariel Tweeto and Megan Carrion, of course, a certain better half to a certain Armando who also lives across the pond. It was an amazing show. And here are some of the highlights from that particular episode.
Women in Aviation special. In this week's show, we're going to forego the traditional show format, and we're going to be hearing from some amazing women from all aspects of aviation. We still have some stories to get in, to get to know some of these women and the efforts that they're undertaking for their different organizations. But we'll kind of have a more roundtable format of the show, and we've got all kinds of interesting segments and fun hosts joining me. So without further ado, let's see who's on the show today. So I think everyone here knows me, so I'm going to keep my introduction brief. If you're tuning into this, yes, you found the correct show. This is actually Plane Talking UK. It is not the Airline Pilot Guy show, which you might be familiar with if you've seen me before anywhere. I am here. I'm a commercial multi-engine pilot. I do skydiving operations on the weekends. Sometimes I jump out of the planes as well. All kinds of other hobbies, marathon running, and my full-time job as a doctor. So joining me this week from the hit Discovery Channel TV show Flying Wild Alaska, a private pilot, TV, film actor, and producer, it's Ariel Tweeto.
Hi, everyone. How's it going?
Awesome. We're doing great here. Looking forward to a fun-packed show. So we'll get to know you a little bit more, but I'm sure folks mostly know who you are already, but we've got some interesting interviews coming up. Also joining us, she's worked in the medical sector for many years. She's an aviation enthusiast by proxy, a fierce feminist and advocate for equality. Megan has had loads of flying experience in all sorts of aircraft as a passenger. She's made aviation a part of her family, attending the Reno Air Races and EAA Air Venture at Oshkosh. It's Megan Carrion.
Hello. I am very excited to be here. I am going to be sitting in for Matt today because my experience in aviation is definitely from a passenger's perspective. Though I have jumped out of airplanes and I've sat right seat with controls in my control once. So yeah, that's my limited aviation experience. But I'm excited to be here and share stories.
Plenty of aviation experience, I would say. So more on that to come. And our next host is a fantastic airshow pilot. She's an aerobatics instructor, an airline pilot, and TikTok aviation educator. Jody has flown approximately, get this, 95 types of aircraft, including her Pitts S1s and Thunder Mustang. It's Jody Ruger.
Hi guys, I brought my Pitts and the Thunder Mustang today, so we're gonna have some fun.
Yes, definitely the best aviation background for the show today.
So I had a unique upbringing. I grew up in a family. My grandpa was one of the first Native American pilots to start an airline. My dad started an airline. All my aunties and uncles fly. My sisters fly. So it wasn't really a matter of if I was going to get my pilot's license. It was always just when I was going to do it. And I said it before, so I'm not afraid of the FAA right now because I'm not flying. But legally, I didn't get my pilot's license till I was like 20 or something. But then me and my sisters had our hands on the yokes by the time we were like 3 or something. So it's always been in our blood, and it's awesome. And I know, like, Jody, you should tell your story of how you got into flying, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more later too.
Yeah, so I figured out I wanted to fly at a pretty young age. I was 12, but I didn't have any family in aviation, so it was very uncharted territory for me. And I made friends with somebody who was in Air Cadets, and they brought me along with them. So I earned my scholarship through Air Cadets, and I got my private pilot license when I was 18. But I've been studying for it since I was like 14 to try and get it going. And I found that if you start from a young age, it's definitely easier because there's more resources available to help the youth out. So that was definitely an asset in just getting into aviation and just jumping in head first, regardless of the fact that I didn't know anything about planes or aviation when I started out. So it's really cool that you had a family to take you under your wing and like try out the controls before. And that was always like a huge dream of mine. So I didn't get to try my first fan flight till I was like 16, but I was just hooked.
So we're going to spend a little bit of time just talking to one another and introducing ourselves to the listeners. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to Ariel to get started. So so thinking back to when you were on the show last, that was episode 327. So John, tell me how long ago that was here. Do we know? July. Okay. So July of last year. Yeah.
Of last year.
Yeah, I know. 2020 was such a blur.
I don't even know what it is anymore.
I know.
I do know it's Friday.
It is. Yes.
That's
very
a start.
important.
That's a start.
You're doing real good.
So you were on that episode back in July 327, and you guys talked a lot about how aviation was a part of your family. We kind of talked about that already a little bit, but for anyone who's been living under a rock and doesn't know about you or your family, can you just share a little bit more maybe about what it was like growing up in your family? Everyone was aviation minded.
Yeah, well, it was the only thing I knew. I grew up in a small village in Alaska, and the only way in and out is by airplane. And so, I mean, from a young age, I knew I wanted to fly because I knew I wanted to get out of the village. And so I was like, well, I guess I need to get some wings before I could leave here. But so that was the thing. But I was so lucky growing up the way I did because I'm obsessed with my parents. I love my parents so much, and they're the most supportive people. And so I'll be super honest, like flying was never the thing that I wanted to do as a career. Like I knew I love flying and I'm passionate about it, but I've always wanted to work in TV and film, and like Betty White and Dick Van Dyke, like those are my people. Like I wanted to be in comedy and all, and I love making people laugh and I like making people smile. But flying is just a tool that would help me get there, because I was really fortunate that our flying show opened a lot of career doors for me. And now I'm super proud to say that I can fly and that I do fly, but it definitely helped open all these other opportunities for me. But yeah, so back to your question, growing up in the village was made me who I am. I'm proud that I'm an Indigenous person. I'm proud that I'm part Norwegian. I'm proud that I have 2 sisters and then I dog race. And I think I'm a lot more complex than just being just a pilot. or a woman or whatever. I think there's a lot more to all that, but I'm super grateful and lucky that I grew up where I did, and I love going back home.
Oh, for sure. I mean, so I've definitely watched episodes of the show. It's a really fascinating look into basically, I mean, just life in Alaska in general too, because that's so different for those of us who live in other parts of the world or even other parts of the United States. You know, I grew up in the Midwest and I live in the South now, and it's definitely not the same. You can get places on road. I mean, I know you're not living in Alaska in a small village anymore, but very different when you can just get in the car and go places or have easy access to other places around the world. So that definitely is really super interesting. You talked a little bit about your family. Speaking of women in aviation things, your mom, Ferna, was a big part of the business as well. Did she get into that just because it was part of the family, because it was what your dad was doing? How did she?
Yeah. Well, my mom started flying before my dad. So here's a fun strong woman fact. So my grandpa started Ryanair, but my grandma bought him his first airplane with her teaching money. So my grandma was the one that actually got it all going. Like my grandma is 91. She won the first ever hunter and fisherman award in all of Alaska, male or female. My grandpa died before I was born, when my mom was like a sophomore in high school. So my grandma raised 10 kids, doctors, teachers, pilots. Like, she's just amazing. And so my mom is just as incredible as my grandma, and she was so strong. Like, she carries a bullwhip. Like, you don't want to mess with Mama Bear because
she seems like quite the character, really. Like,
oh man,
yeah, definitely lots of personality there.
So much personality, and so I actually haven't even seen our show. I saw maybe like part of the premiere, and then I was like, that's how I sound? That's how I walk? And then our producer was like, here, let's go sit at the bar. You're not allowed to watch yourself anymore. And so after that, I was just like, yeah, I'm never watching myself again. Because you become too critical of the way you are. And I'm like, I like who I am. I don't need to watch it and try to fix myself. And so I don't watch it. But back to my mom, I think she would have gotten on the show a lot more, but they had to edit out everything because the whole show would have been like beep, 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 beep. So I'm just like, Mom, you can't talk like that around like strangers. And so she's so great. But I think I said it earlier, the most supportive people. When I first started, I wanted to be the first girl in the NBA, and my mom and dad were like, yeah, you're going to be, like, tell us your goals and we're going to help you get there. And my mom is just like, if me and my sisters tell her, it's like, hey, I want to make it to the moon one day. She's like, okay, what do we got to do? You're going to the moon one day. And just so great. And so I'm so lucky to have parents like them. But yeah, my mom and my grandma.
Just amazing role models, and especially, from the female aspect of it, the women's side of your family. That's amazing about your grandmother. I had no idea about that type of stuff. And then your mom as well. And so comment from,
Yeah, she says, I actually started flying because of Air Alaska show. Before that, I didn't even know being a pilot was accessible. So Ariel, you have already inspired, I'm sure you've inspired lots of young people, young girls. But yeah, somebody in the chat room has been inspired by you directly.
Yeah. So carrying on that tradition, that just directly flows forward from there, from what your grandmother did to you, or to your mom to you, and then on to, people you don't even know personally. So that's
awesome.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot that people are inspired. And that's just, that's my goal. I feel like, and my purpose is to get people inspired to follow their passions and to follow their dreams. And so it was Izzy. Thank you for watching and for being inspired, and keep it up.
Well, speaking of inspirational female pilots, Jody Ruger, I am tasked with getting to know you. And I am told that you were back here on episode 348 back in December. Do you remember this? This wasn't that long ago.
Yes, I do. You guys are very memorable.
Oh, good. Well, not us, because the guys,
yeah. The usual stuff.
But we are also very memorable. So what have you been up to since then?
Well, since then, I have still not been able to work for the airlines again. So to keep myself busy, I've been learning aircraft maintenance. And I feel like that is one of the next best things that I can do to help myself become a better pilot and have a really thorough understanding of my systems, especially because I fly so many experimental planes that don't have a pilot operating handbook. You just have to know, are you running a Continental engine or a Lycoming? Is it fuel injected? Is it carbureted? And how is that going to react under different circumstances? So you can actually diagnose a lot of issues and prevent yourself from getting stranded on the road. And that's one of the things that I was inspired to do when I lost my mentor earlier this summer. He was such a huge part of my life, and he did a lot of the maintenance, installing my smoke system, and I learned a ton from him. And I realized, when people like this go away, we need to be able to pass on those skills, not just to ourselves, but the next generation as well. So I found a shop here with the Thunder Mustang, and that's how I sort of got into the position of being the airshow pilot for the Thunder Mustang. Is I expressed a really big interest in learning the maintenance at this shop, and they took me under their wing and started giving me some experience towards my AMP. I thought that I was just going to come in for a quick annual, and as I learned more about the planes and how to do everything correctly, I have been just absolutely ripping my parts, as you may see. So we've actually removed the smoke tank, because the fuel tank rather, I'm going to be making a custom smoke tank to try and get like a world record on the most smoke oil you can get in a pits, because it's not much. And I would like to have a really awesome air show in it. So we're like relocating the brake reservoir to go the other side of the firewall. We've just started to rip this thing apart head to tail. And I'm hoping to just have a really awesome air show season if things start to calm down and the world opens up, and be able to make some really exciting media content and pursue some sponsors until the airline industry picks back up.
That looks and sounds terrifying. But I'm sure you've got it handled. But like the fact that you lost your mentor, and so now you have to kind of get to know all of these things, is probably incredibly beneficial. I know for myself, like a lot of the fear comes from not knowing how systems work. And so it makes sense that would make you a better pilot, right?
Yeah, and it was really important to me to take that experience and turn it into something positive. And I just never encountered somebody who was just so generous and talented and skilled. And I figure if I haven't encountered anybody like that in the industry, it's sort of my job to carry on that legacy and learn those skills and be that person to somebody, be that role model or that inspiration or that mentor and guide, and help people get to where everybody helped me get to. I had to learn a lot of this on my own in the last year, and it's just something that's so meaningful for me to be able to take this on. So I thought that was really cool, and it's keeping me definitely busy.
Yeah. Because, so this is like a TikTok thing, right? Where you're kind of providing these educational videos on social media.
Yeah, that is part of how it started. I started creating educational videos because I did a barrel roll water pour. So I was pouring the water while doing
Yes, that is so cool.
And I had a lot of people calling me out saying, "Oh, that's fake, you're in a simulator." And I was like, well, no, it really isn't. Actually, I tried really hard to learn how to do that. So I'm offended that you think so.
Science people.
Yeah, so instead of getting offended, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna just treat them like, okay, they just don't know how to do this. So I broke it down. I started creating these videos where I drilled a hole in a plastic cup and tied it to a rope and swung it around full of water to show them, like, even if you're a 5-year-old, this is an experiment you can do at home. This is how positive G-forces work and coordinating the aircraft, and you can really do this. And I started just breaking things down in a really simple way. And then the TikTok Educators Fund for the Creative Learning actually approached me and asked if I could do this. So I'm really lucky that my sponsor has been very flexible. He's allowed me to make a lot of videos of what I'm doing here. If I'm cleaning and gapping spark plugs or doing a composite repair, or just showing the brake lines on my pits and how that all works. So I've been breaking down some systems and trying to really condense it into 15-second to 1-minute segments on something that day, a different system of the aircraft as I go.
That's really cool. So you have a lot of experience as an air show performer. And I have been to a couple of air shows, and I am just always, again, terrified. That's like my experience with aviation is I'm terrified. These things scare the crap out of me. So how did you get into air show performing?
When I was first starting out in college, my dad was dropping me off. I was moving all my stuff there. I was like 18, and we were sitting at this pub getting lunch, and I watched the Red Bull Air Races on TV. And I thought, that is so cool. And I want to do that when I grow up. I still don't think I've grown up. But I always thought that pulling G's was fun. Like ever since I was a kid, if we had these two hills close to our house, and when we got close to it, tell our dad to speed up so we would lose our stomachs. You know, you get like slightly less energy going over the crest of the hill. And I could just never stop smiling when I was pulling G's, and it was always a thing for me. So I decided I've really got to pursue this and find a way to keep aerobatics in my life. And I didn't know if I had the stomach for it. I just started looking into buying a plane because there was nothing available to me. So I started researching how to start my own aerobatics school. And I just never had the funding available to me when I was first starting out. So the 8th time that I had third-party funding fall through on me, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to join the airlines, get a more lucrative career, and buy my own plane. And so the first year that I flew the Q400, I bought a half share in the Pitts S1 that you see behind me, which is about the most bang for your buck you can possibly get when it comes to aerobatic planes. Then from there, you know, I started doing competitive aerobatics before that, as soon as I had moved to BC. And my plane, the short version of the story is my plane got stolen from the flight school by another instructor who just went rogue.
Oh my God.
Yeah, pretty wild. And I had the plane booked out for like 6 months. It was my very first aerobatic contest. I was so excited. I've been training so hard and like spending every penny I could save working my second job to do this. So the last minute, the whole aerobatic community came together and they lent me a super decathlon, but it was US registered. So I had to have a safety pilot. And my safety pilot ended up being an airshow pilot. And he saw how interested I was in all of this. And the Red Bull Air Race, you had to be top 50% in the world in competitive aerobatics and have a surface level airshow waiver was the criteria at the time. So he said, hey, would you like to crew for me? I love what you've been doing with the Aerobatic Club. I won the contest even with him in the back when I went to my first contest. So he was impressed with my flying. He was trying to train me to become his ferry pilot. And I got to crew at all these different air shows and sit in on the briefings and just learn the ropes and how to build safety margins into everything and get the experience and exposure to the industry that I really needed to get started. And that was really valuable to me.
That's amazing. I think we actually have a video clip, is that right, of aerobatics where, is this the one where you've got a little girl doing some aerobatics?
Yeah, so that little girl, I don't think I've met a cooler kid in my life.
That is so cool.
She instantly just fell in love with me, and she found out that I flew, and she's like, will you take me flying? And my mentor is her grandpa. So she saw me at the airport one day and she ran up and she's like, Jody, and she gave me this big hug and she asked if she could come flying with me. So I was like, well, of course, let's just call your dad. And he gave us the go ahead. And I just thought it would be a cute video to make. And this thing went viral, like beyond anything that I expected. And she was just so gung-ho. She's really, really having fun when we're pulling G's, but anytime we stop, you can see her just like concentrating really hard on what I'm doing. And she was following the controls. She actually tried to rotate the plane.
Wow. She's like, I got this.
Settle down and actually start teaching her, because I figured out pretty quick she was going to try and learn how to do what I was doing.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen so much joy on a child's face in my life.
I'm pretty sure she is like one of my favorite human beings. She is just a gem, and she's so excited. And like her headset falls off, and she knows how to like put it back on. The next time I took her flying, she ran up in a tutu and asked if we could bring her candy. So I taught her how to float the candy and try and catch it in the air.
Oh, that is so cool. I love it. That is such an awesome experience. I know my daughter is 6, and when we took her flying and she had the controls, she was just kind of, I think she was a little tentative at first, but then she kind of like jerked it really far. And then like we have a video of her face when that happened, and she was just like, it was just pure shock and then excitement right after that. And I think maybe we've introduced her to flying now, and she's gonna.
Oh, you've created a monster.
Caught the bug. Yes. So how would you, because we're talking about kids, and you've obviously had some really joyous moments with kids and aviation, how would you mentor young women getting into aviation? What would you, how would you give them advice? What advice would you give them, I guess?
I guess for me, it took me a really long time to understand that when people were making jokes about me, it wasn't us just like razzing each other and I had to be witty back and give them a joke back when they're like, oh, you're going to be my flight attendant. I was like, I would just make a wittier joke back than them. It took me, I realized after 11 years that some of it wasn't a joke. And so I actually just always treated it exactly the same. If anybody told me I couldn't do it, I just didn't believe them, or I thought that they were joking. Like I had no reason to believe I should have taken it seriously. So it's the same sort of advice that I would give everybody else, except, once you realize that that's not a joke, you might want a different support structure in place. And right. My best friend is the girl who got her private pilot license with me. So if you're starting young, I put a lot of research into scholarships, and when I was looking through that, like it was just everywhere. There's tons of scholarships out there, and that's how I got my start. Or just start showing up at an airfield, and you will be surprised how inviting and amazing the culture and experience in aviation is. And if you show up, there'll be people who are so happy to take you under your wing, because aviation is full of such passionate people. So just start checking out the airport and ask people about their planes. I haven't met a pilot that doesn't want to talk about their airplane yet.
That's a very good point. And I have that same experience being somebody who's not familiar to the aviation world, just kind of walking up into local airfields with Armando. Everybody is super welcoming. It's like a second home now. Like no matter where we go, if we've never been there before, everybody is just like mi casa es su casa. It's great. I love it.
Fly-ins and everything. I mean, there's so much fun stuff to do. So next we're going to get to know one of our lovely ladies today, Steph Plummer. So Steph, we're getting to know you a little bit as we go, but we're going to dig deeper here. So you're managing your career as a doctor while also finding the time to fly regularly. How do you do that?
So I like to tell people that I've managed to, my days have 36 hours. I've expanded it from the usual 24, so that way I can cram more things all into a single day. No, I don't. Sometimes it feels that way. I think all of us have kind of had that experience, being successful in our careers and everything else, where you have a lot on your plate all at one time. And I kind of thrive on being busy in general. If I'm not doing something, I feel like there's something I should be doing. So, that's just me. That's how I've always been. I think some of that has part of the way we were talking about some of our backgrounds and growing up before. I was always involved heavily with athletics and swimming and doing a lot with school and different projects. So even from an early age, I was at the pool at 5 o'clock in the morning, had to do that before school and after school, cram in a whole day of classes. And then I would work as a lifeguard afterwards and try to do my homework while I was lifeguarding. And then you go to bed, you leave the pool at 10 p.m. and you're back at 5 o'clock in the morning. So, I've always just been kind of go. So that's transitioned really well into my current life. But yes, I do. I know people who follow me on social media and that other podcast, Airline Pilot Guy. Sometimes wonder how I cram that all in, or if I actually even have a day job. But I assure you that I do work full time. I'm a physician. I do non-surgical spine care. So if you ever have a cortisone injection for back pain or sciatica, I'm the person that you come to get those types of things. So, and yes, somehow I still managed to.
What's that? You sure so you kept busy? Do you sure so that you also sleep though?
Yes, sleep is also that's like the most prized time of those 36, no, just 24 hours. If I didn't sleep, I wouldn't function, and that's really a big part of the balance. It's eating well, it's sleeping well, it's staying hydrated, it's making time for friends and the things that are fun and interesting in life, because otherwise it would just be a grind.
In between doing all this stuff, how did you get into aviation? Like what point in your life, what brought you to this and why?
So very different on my aspect or on my side of things in terms of how I got into aviation. I was always very interested in science in general. So my degree is in biology. Actually, when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be an on-camera meteorologist. Like I loved watching the Weather Channel. I am super nerdy, and I'm not afraid to admit that. But I got into applying for majors in college and realized how much math went into that. So in the STEM side of things, math is not my favorite. In fact, I really don't love it. And I was worried that the amount of math that was required to get a degree in meteorology was going to kill my love of just knowing things about the weather. So I was like, I like the biology side of things. I like people. I like medicine. So I kind of started going down that road and discovered that was going to be the right path for me. So I did that. And it really wasn't until I was in residency. So I was through medical school, and I was in my second year of residency. And one of my coworkers, her husband was a flight instructor. So to stay on there, time out. And I was doing some babysitting for them. I'll get back to that in a second. And, because we were helping each other out. So we were working long hours as residents. And like on the weekends, if my coworker was working and he had to be at the FBO, either flight instructing or just working the front desk there, I'd end up watching their kid. And then, sorry for the noise my computer is making in the background. He, at one point was like, instead of us just, paying you what we've been paying you to babysit for a few hours, if you want to come take an intro flight, that would be really amazing. And I said, well, yeah, that sounds like fun. And I had never even considered, I mean, I've always liked going places and travel and doing things, no stranger to flying on aircraft, but I'd never actually considered it as something I would do personally up until that point. And then we went on that first intro flight and I was like, oh, well, I'm in trouble now because I have to learn how to do this. So
it's dangerous. It'll get you hooked.
Oh, completely.
All right. We found out that you are also a very inspirational woman in the chat. We have a few people grabbing IPAs now.
Yes. I will turn people on to my favorite style of beer.
All right. I see that you've also landed an opportunity to fly skydivers. What was that like?
So very interesting flying. So I've been involved in skydiving and jumping for since about, I'm trying to think now, 2014 or so. I don't do a ton of jumping, but probably 25 jumps or so a year on my free weekends, just enough to stay in it and stay current most of the time. But just hanging around the skydiving center and the drop zone on a regular basis on the weekends, you just start to meet people, you form connections. They all knew that I was flying a lot, and that was really kind of my passion and how I was involved more in aviation. It was more about the flying than the jumping side of things. Yeah, let's keep moving on. So we've got, we're going to get to know our hosts a little bit more here. And I think this time we've got Ariel interviewing Megan. So
yay! I'm really excited about this. First of all, I just like looking at your face. I'm just like,
oh, that's very sweet. Thank you.
Of course. No, you're so gorgeous and you have such a good spirit around you. And so just like, I can't wait till we get to meet in person, which will, I bet, happen hopefully soon at like Oshkosh or Reno. But so first, so I know your background isn't in aviation. Can you tell me and the listeners what is your background? Just tell me a little bit about you.
Well, my background has absolutely nothing to do with aviation. It was only when I met my lovely husband that I was introduced to aviation. My dad was in the military, but he was in the Navy. He had nothing to do with aviation. Armando was in the military when I met him, actually, and we traveled kind of all over the country on these distant dates when we were starting to get to know each other, which was very cool. And actually, when I met him, he had a very cool little airplane, which was actually my first time flying a non-commercial flight. He had this, well, it's here somewhere. I don't know where it is now. He's got a model of it back here. He had a Lancer 360. And if you don't know what that looks like, he called it a Sucrets box with wings. So basically like just the tiniest thing. And so that was my first introduction into flying not on a commercial flight, and it was terrifying and wonderful. And like I said, I trust my husband implicitly. He's just a really smart guy. He is totally capable and super safe. And so my background has nothing to do with aviation, but my introduction to aviation has been amazing. And so because he knows so much about aviation and his experience is so kind of well-rounded, it's given me an opportunity to see a lot of things that I just wouldn't have had any clue about. So I'm getting interested.
Oh, that's exciting. I wonder if his plan to take you flying and all that was intentional. He's like,
I'm sure.
So if she's
Yeah.
scared, those endorphins are going way up, and she's definitely gonna want to squeeze me. So
There are ulterior motives.
Yeah, your husband is a smart man, and it worked.
Yeah,
and I got a little
worked.
kiddo out of it.
For
So
sure.
exciting. What about Oshkosh? What's your experience there with diversity and Amanda? I believe it's Amanda Simpson interview.
I love Amanda Simpson. Yes. So we actually got to go to Oshkosh 2 years ago now. And Armando was there kind of doing some interviews for PTUK. And we were able to meet some really incredible women. Amanda Simpson, I think I don't know if this is correct. I think she's the first out transgender executive at an airline company. And she was just incredibly inspiring and very intimidating. We walked in to interview her, and she had a kind of like a security person with her to make sure that we were asking the questions that were appropriate. And I was just awestruck. I was awestruck about her just composure and her abilities to just kind of cut through the noise and get the job done. And she was super inspiring. And then I saw some other women. There's like the whole women venture is part of Oshkosh. And so that was really cool to have like a separate dedicated focus on women in aviation. And it really, really inspired me and kind of challenged me to I don't know, get a little more exposure, to get a little bit more, I don't know, ballsy, I guess. Is that the right thing to say when we're talking about women in aviation? Probably not.
Sure. Yeah.
I think you could say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It must,
it's
I,
exciting.
yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah.
It is a little nerve-wracking when you're interviewing people, though, because you want to show them that amount of respect, but you never know if you're going to offend someone or how, like, what's the verbiage or the jargon. And so I want to watch that interview.
She's so good. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure we could probably figure out which episode she was on. But she's definitely been here at least 2 years ago, I think. We'll let you know. If we can't get it live, we'll let you know in the YouTube notes there. So
on the YouTubes, perfect. So
on the YouTube.
What on the YouTubes? Well, your little daughter, what has that experience been like with her flying? You mentioned earlier that you guys took her out for the first time. Are you and that you trust your husband with your life, and now I guess you trust him with hers. So what's your dream for her? Do you want her to get into aviation? Are you afraid for her? Maybe she'll inspire you. Like, what's your dream for your daughter?
Ooh, I like that. Maybe she'll inspire me. She inspires me every day. She's amazing. She's an amazing, tiny little human going on like an 80-year-old woman. She amazes me constantly. Honestly, I would love to be like, yes, I want her to be a female aviator, but honestly, I want her to do whatever makes her happy and whatever she's passionate about. And Armando and I will absolutely support her in whatever endeavor that ends up being. She is an incredibly smart girl and picks up everything like instantly. And so I know her curiosity is endless. And I know Armando takes advantage of that by teaching her things about aviation and kind of planting those seeds. And I'm totally fine with that.
Well, I'm so horrible at things because I never usually stick to the script. And I was like, I want to talk about your love life and like all this stuff. But then there's one last question that they wanted me to ask. And so what are the challenges of being a military/airline partner? Let's talk about that.
Well, that encompasses the love life, right? So I guess some of the challenges are just the schedules and the kind of unexpected changes to the schedule, because as a mother, schedule is so important. Routine is so important. And if I am, expecting that I'm going to have help on a certain day, and then I don't have it, that kind of throws things off, and we need to readjust. And so that's probably the hardest part of being a partner of someone who is constantly kind of at the whim of someone else. But thankfully, that's kind of less and less of our life lately. His schedule has become a little bit more flexible, and so we get a lot of family time, which is really wonderful. And so then we get to experience flying together. And honestly, the thing that we do when we're all together and we have nothing to do, which is rare, but when we do get a chance to just hang out, we'll go to the drop zone, which is the little grass strip that Steph was mentioning, where he is a skydive pilot occasionally on the weekends. So we'll just go and hang out and watch airplanes fly and watch people fall out of the sky.
That's awesome.
This has been wonderful. Such a good show. I'm so excited that this all came together and we were able to highlight so many different women in aviation, different aspects of aviation. It's a big world out there. So
I love the diversity that we have brought to this show this week. It is incredibly exciting. And I am really excited that we've given some more kind of opportunity for young people to see what the opportunities could be, and also for young people in their 40s-ish.
Yes, we'll find you that
providing
flight
those
instructor.
opportunities.
Find you that
Thank
flight
you.
instructor.
And
I know
really
we need
quick,
to wrap it up here, but go ahead. Any
Thank
last
you.
words?
Thank you to the guys too for letting us take over their platform. That says a lot about your character and how kind you guys are to let us girls shine for a bit. So thank you very much for letting us take the lead in this. It was really nice.
Hear, hear. So I think with that, we will go ahead and wrap up the official live broadcast here. So that was episode, no number, just Women in Aviation special. Very exciting stuff. Until next week, this has been Dr. Steph, Megan Carrion, Ariel Tweedo, and Jody Ruger for the Plane Talking UK. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
That's been a very large part of the show, actually, isn't it? Or the year, in fact. Talking to so many people, and obviously we couldn't put all of our favourites in, otherwise it will be an extremely long show. But I'd just like to thank everybody that's contributed in 2021, all the people we've interviewed, all the people that have been involved with the show, but most importantly, the viewers and listeners, because you are the folks that really make it. And we are really grateful for your contributions, both monetary in some cases, but more importantly, when you're in the chat room and when you send us audio feedback and emails as well.
I mean, honestly, the questions in the chat room are what really make it for me, because they have far better questions than you and I could ever possibly dream up of. It's been so much fun. It really has. As I say, we cannot thank you enough for your support and involvement over the last the last 12 months, because it's been a funny old year for all of us, I think, isn't it, Nev? I think that's safe to say.
Yes.
Absolutely. And to still be going from strength to strength. I mean, my worry, Nev, is that we've set the bar very high now for 2022, because we've got to somehow do bigger and better things. But I'm sure we'll all rise to the challenge. And of course, we have got our big 400th, which we're hoping will still go ahead, restrictions permitting, at the end of February. So very excited about that. And if you haven't been in touch to register your interest, you can do that by emailing podcast@planetalkinguk.com. You could also send us a WhatsApp as well, +44 757 2249166. If you want to follow us on social media, all you have to do is search Facebook for No, that's the
Hey,
nearly did that wrong. Where should they be looking, Nev? I'm clearly going to get that wrong.
I would look for Plane Talking.
That's it.
UK.
I knew it started with a P.
Hang on.
Plane Talking UK. And of course, as I say, search all your social media for that as well. So we're going to wrap up, Nev, and I just wanted to say a personal thank you to you, sir. It's been a really, really fun 12 months, really, and it wouldn't have been the same without you sat there in your wonderful office joining us for as many. You've had a busy year, actually, so that you haven't been able to make as many as you would normally, because you managed to go sort of more or less straight back to work. I don't know how you managed that one.
Yes, there was quite a bit of work going on this year, which did mean that I was away for some of the Friday shows, unfortunately. But no, I'm hoping that things, although with the COVID business, you never quite know what direction it's going to go in. No. But although things are looking a bit difficult at the moment, it does look like as though certain things are going to be better in 2022. So,
absolutely, yes.
Keep our fingers crossed for all of that.
Indeed, and fingers crossed for the big meetup, the 400 show, going ahead as planned. Alfie didn't want to feel left out. Obviously, that's why he's
no, indeed. And actually, just today, I've been organising the food.
Have you?
As well.
How exciting!
So I've been talking with the hotel about that. So yes, when we send you a confirmation of your attendance, we'll be asking you for a small food contribution as well. I don't mean send us a sausage roll.
No,
I mean,
not in the post anyway.
a small amount of money to,
absolutely
to assist with those costs.
Going to be a lot of fun. Here is to an amazing 2022. My personal thanks to Carlos, obviously, who created the madness that you and I are involved in every single week. So my thanks to you, Nev, for all your support over this last 12 months. Big thanks to our producer, John, who I know you guys don't get to see, and you'd be terrified the amount of work that has to actually go on behind the scenes to get this on the air every single Friday evening. It is beyond mind-blowing, and John does that with a big smile and does all the research and stuff, and his contribution cannot be undersold, I don't think. And of course, my other big personal thanks has to go to Armando. He is genuinely, I think, the coolest human being that has ever existed on planet Earth, and he literally has no clue. Which is just so exhausting, because he's just like the coolest guy in the world. We are very lucky to have him as part of our team, and he is able to do something which I didn't think was possible, Nev, I'll be honest, and that is make military actually interesting.
Yes, I can't complain. And
No.
I've learned a lot from him.
Yeah, absolutely.
This year, definitely. So, but he manages to squeeze it all in between the flying that he does. Which sometimes I know is very challenging for him, but he's always sending segments in every week, regardless of how busy he is. So thank you, Armando, and thank you, Matt, as well, for piecing it all together when it comes in. Sometimes a little bit later than we would normally like. But, I can't really complain.
I see it as just a challenge. It's one of those, isn't it? We just throw it all together. But it has been. It's so much fun. I just sit here and press buttons. I've got the easy job. I really have, and then ask questions that to me sound quite stupid. But then there we go. I suppose that's my role in all this, isn't it? Asking the questions. It's been so much fun. Nev, thank you for keeping me company today. That is it. That is pretty much it for this show.
It is, and we'll be back as normal every Friday evening at 7 o'clock UK time. Thoroughly looking forward to your company in 2022, and I think we're going to have a lot going on with more interviews, hopefully some more air shows.
Oh,
as
fingers
well.
crossed.
All those nice things. We can get outside when the weather's better, and of course now the weather is still a bit ropey, but at least it's getting a little bit lighter, isn't it? So
absolutely,
at least that'll be something. But anyway, from Matt and myself, thank you very much indeed for joining us. See you next time.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.